Good afternoon. Calling to order a special meeting of the El Segundo City Council, Thursday, March 22nd, a fee study session. So Councilmember Perstek is going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please join me. Pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, roll call.
Councilmember Perstek?
Here.
Councilmember Brand?
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Boyles?
Here. Mayor
Fuentes?
Here. Now is the time for public communications related to city business in this agenda. 5 minutes per person. If anyone would like to speak, this is the time. Seeing no public communications, we will close. We have special orders of business. Consideration and possible action regarding a fee study session on citywide fees and cost recovery policy discussion. So we'd like to thank everybody for joining us today and all the work that went into doing this. City Manager.
Mayor, members of council, just so you're aware, Councilmember Dugan contacted us and told us he'll be running a couple minutes late, so he should be stepping in at any moment. This is a workshop, so probably less formal. Let us know if you want to take a break, ask questions as we go. That's the intent, is to have a conversation about probably 6 or 8 months worth of research that's been done on this topic. And we're working towards wanting to get some direction from council, but we understand that you first have to understand the work that's been done and the methodology that's been used and discuss some of these things. So this is meant to be a working session, just as a reminder. I know you've heard this before, but it's been about 10 years since the city really comprehensively went through its fee schedule. Rec and park fees were updated with the help of a council subcommittee several years ago, so those are a little bit more current, but for the most part, the city's fees haven't been updated in 10 years. And because fees really, for the most part, are based on costs, you're not supposed to charge more than your cost. There are some exceptions for things like room rental, where it's more of a reservation. But with respect to fees for services, they're really supposed to be based on your costs. And you can imagine over the last 10 years, a lot of those variables have changed that go into our cost structure. Our pension costs, our salary costs, in the case of building permits that are based on construction costs, those have changed dramatically in the last 10 years. So in order to stay current and to really have fees that match your costs, it's important for cities to go through this type of evaluation on a regular basis. We're probably a little late, and council brought that to our attention a year and a half ago. In the strategic plan, you asked us to undertake this effort. So Joe Lilio and his staff put out a request for proposal. We did award to RCS, Revenue Cost Specialists, a contract last summer, and they've spent the last 6 months or so working directly with the departments and on their own to establish what our fully burdened costs for some of these services are. So I'm going to turn it over to Eric Johnson. He's with Revenue Cost Specialists. They are the firm that did our comprehensive amendment 10 years ago. And using a lot of the same methodology, different variables, but a lot of the same methodology, have developed some proposals around what our fees could be if they're based on fully allocated costs. There are also, so we're going to walk through this. We're going to talk about the methodology. You're going to see that some fees are recommended for increases. There are some fees that are recommended for decreases, primarily in the area of planning and building. And there are some new fees. Through this exercise, we realized that there were things that we were providing, services that we were providing that we weren't charging for at all. And there are some services that we're no longer providing. We're recommending that those fees be dropped off the schedule. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Eric Johnson, and he'll walk us through this.
Great. Thank you, Greg. Mayor, members of the council, I'm Eric Johnson from Revenue Cost Specialists. Good to be back in front of you today. Just want to do a quick recap of the presentation we did a month or so ago, just to make sure everyone's on the same page and people that are watching and listening that haven't heard this already. Revenue and cost specialist, we've been doing this for over 40 years. We've been doing this since Proposition 13 was founded. This is what we do. In the almost 40 years since then, we've worked with over 250 agencies, mostly in California. I personally have been doing this for over 28 years, working over 100 different agencies, including this one before. And so what have we done? We really recast the city budget as if it were a business. And so that means there's no city council service, there's no city manager service, but we've focused it on what does it cost to provide services to your customers, the public. And we've done that by creating a fully burned hourly rate for everybody. And I used the example before of a can of corn. You know, when you go to the grocery store and you buy a can of corn, you know you're paying for the person who grew the corn and the person who got the corn to you and the people at the grocery store and the management of the people at the grocery store. You know you're paying for all the pieces of that process along the way when you buy that can of corn or when you buy anything. We've done that same type of thing here. All these services that you see here are fully burdened just like a business would be. What does it cost to provide those services to your customer? And so you're not gonna, if you're a business, you're not going to stay in business very long if you're not doing these kinds of things. And so we understand that city's not a business, but when we look at what it costs, we should look at it as if it were a business. And we also matched up revenues to cost. Again, if you're a business, you're not going to stay in business very long if you're not matching up revenues. Your revenues you're bringing in with your costs going out. So we've done that also. How did we do it? We really sat down with city staff and broke everything down and took a look at all the services being provided, identified all those services, and identified how much time is being spent by who on all these various different services. And we did this over a 3 to 4 month process, multiple meetings with the departments, how much time per service, how much of time do you have available, how many of these are you doing. We made sure that we're allocating out only 100% of people's available time. We haven't created time that doesn't exist. We also looked at all the time being provided by everybody. And so there's fee-supported services in here, there's tax-supported services. Most of what the city does is a tax-supported service, whether it be police or fire or streets or parks, those things that aren't going to be paid for by fees, just by their very nature. There's a whole host of things in here that you either are charging a fee for or could be charging a fee for. There's also a whole host of things in here that are administrative in nature, that provide support to other parts of the organization. And so we developed a finely detailed cost allocation plan where we broke out all the administrative pieces of the organization and allocated those back to the parts of the organization that are receiving support. So as an example, accounts payable function. We identified what is the cost of that in finance. We allocated out to the different departments by number of payables. So everyone gets their fair share of that accounts payable function based on how many payables they have. And we break that out, accounts receivable and human resources and city clerk and city council. City council costs are allocated out, city manager costs are allocated out. So all the administrative costs are allocated out. So when we say there's a fully burned hourly rate, it includes salaries, benefits, operating expenses, as you would expect, but also includes the city overhead cost and their fair allocation of the city overhead cost. In a lot of departments, you also have a departmental overhead cost for the departmental staff within that department providing support to the other people in that department, department head, clerical staff. And in some cases, we have divisional overhead or within a division where there's administrative support provided within a division. So that fully burned hourly rate, again, is what it costs for that position to be able to do its job and all the costs related to that. So we created all that, and that salary benefit part of it, I want to make sure everyone's clear, is based on what people are actually making. Actual salaries, not what, top step of what it could be down the road, but people's actual salaries. So we took that time detail, we matched that up with those fully burned hourly rates, and that gave us the cost detail that you see in the report there. So all those costs in there are fully burdened and based on that time detail and that hourly rate. We then broke out the services between community supported services and personal choice services. And we'll talk about that in a minute. For those personal choice services, those services that are either supported by fees or could be supported by fees, we then sat down with the departments again, reviewed those costs again, identified if we wanted to recover 100% of the cost in most cases, what would that fee look like? And make sure that if we want to restructure the fee, that if you guys were to approve this fee today, that it's something that would work at the counter and it's a fee that would make sense. So again, community supported versus personal choice services. Community supported are those things, as I mentioned, police services, fire services, street maintenance, park maintenance, those things when people say, that's what I pay my tax dollars for, that's what they pay their tax dollars for. Those things that benefit the community as a whole. Conversely, personal choice services, things that you could charge a fee for, they're measurable, they benefit a specific group or individual. You may still choose to subsidize certain things. That's entirely up to you. You can't charge more than the cost. But for certain things that you decide are important enough to use your tax dollars to subsidize, you certainly can. And of course, the biggest example of fee services are all the planning, building, engineering fees that the city charges. In California local government, when it comes down to it, there's really two big pots of money, taxes and grants and fees. Taxes and grants, especially property taxes, defined by Proposition 13, limited by Proposition 13. A year later, Proposition 4 was passed, allowing agencies to charge the cost reasonably borne to provide the service. Voters of the state said they wanted cities to look and act more like a business and to charge those services that you could. So we matched those two different revenue pots up with the two different cost pots, and so taxes and grants designed to support community-supported services, fees designed to support personal choice services. But to the extent that fees don't cover the cost, it can only come from one other place, and that's taxes. And so they have this leakage of tax revenue to support personal choice services to the extent that the fees don't cover the cost. And that of course, means you have less money to spend on community-supported services like police and fire and streets and parks. You can only spend $1 once, and once you spend it to subsidize a personal choice service, you can't spend it to pay for these community-supported services. So we identified about $1.4 million in subsidies to personal choice services. You'll notice that the recommendations for possible new revenue is only about $600,000, and so there's a gap there. And part of that gap is there's certain services that even if you charge the full cost, they're not designed to recover the full, like police false alarm and fire false alarm. There's a big cost there that is going to be continued to subsidize because you're not charging everybody. You're only charging when they have so many responses. So there'll be those kinds of things where even if you charge the full cost, you're not going to necessarily recover $1.4 million. So at the end of the day, it's up to you, the elected representatives of El Segundo, to decide those policy choices as to who's going to pay for these services. The services are occurring. The costs are occurring. It's a question of who's going to pay for it, the person receiving or the group receiving the benefit of that service, or the community, or a combination of the two.
Thank you for that, Eric. Question on the fully burdened rate. How are benefits and future liabilities, future expenses, I should say, factored in for pensions, et cetera? You said salary, but I didn't hear
right.
Total comp.
We've definitely included what was budgeted for retirement benefits, for instance, for this year. We did not put in a elevator, as it were, for future pension obligations and how that would affect the cost this year. And so as time goes on, we all expect those pension benefits to increase, but we've only included at this point the pension cost for this year.
But with this, once we get to a baseline of the changes we want to make, then we can factor some kind of increase over the next few years, because it's definitely, okay.
Absolutely.
So we might have to revisit fees next year then, Joe, probably.
And I have a similar question, but it has to do with current. You said that these numbers are based on actual salaries, fully burdened, but is there any sort of CPI or elevator to your term used as, because this is just a snapshot?
Right. I would certainly recommend going forward that next year you either make some larger adjustments, or at a minimum you do a CPI increase to keep up on the costs as they happen. So when you go to do a full update 3 to 5 years down the road, that you don't have as big a difference in the changes in the fees, because you've been doing some minor increases over time.
So, Mayor Pro Tem, to address your question. So my intention is to bring a master fee schedule. So we have all the fees now, put it on one master fee schedule. Bring that before City Council during strategic planning or during the budget process, and apply some sort of CPI factor. And we can do that each year. So that way we keep these somewhat current with some of the costs that are.
And then I just have one question too. As far as the number for the employees for the benefits, are you classifying for every approved position and not just currently hired? Like what is, because we have open positions. Are those baked into this number?
So Eric, I believe you use budget, correct?
Use budget. So if there's a vacant funded position that is expected to be filled within the next 6 to 12 months, we've included it.
Okay.
Joe, just, so CPI, we're looking at 2 to 4% increase year over year potentially. I don't know that that will address, maybe I'm missing something, the pension hit that we have in terms of percent of payroll going forward.
Right. So there are, if we do have other cost drivers that are higher than inflation, then we can also adjust those, and that would filter through and end up having an outcome to the fees. And we can highlight that section also separate from the CPI increase.
Okay, thank you.
Question, Joe. What was the cost of revenue and cost specialist study here? What was their proposal to the city?
I believe it was 37,000, 38,000. I guess we did have a total of, we issued the RFP in April of 2017. Did have 4 vendors respond. One decided not to continue, and we did have, so 3 finalists, and they were actually the lowest cost vendor that did respond. I want to say it was 37,000.
Okay. So I take it that it's been 10 years since we've done this study.
Yes, sir.
And I take it there's no requirement to do this study. No specific requirement that you need to do it every 3 years or.
So there's nothing in our municipal code, nothing in the state code that says you have to do it. But however, best practices suggest that you should do a comprehensive fee study every 5 years, and you should annually update your fee schedule at least by some type of inflator.
Mm-hmm. So it looks like if we went with everything we're presented with here, it nets out over $600,000 more in fees for the city, and increased fees, less decreased fees, and new fees. So it means looking back over this last 10 years, we went through the Great Recession, and we didn't initiate one of these fee studies. Seems like that would have been a good idea 7 years ago, 9 years ago to do this and not wait. So I guess what I'm saying is let's do this again in 2022 or something like that. Let's not suffer through the Great Depression and miss this as an opportunity to put things better right.
I think that's a good point, Dr. Brand, especially 2022 is where we're looking at unfunded pension liabilities being 25% of the general fund, so.
And for the record, we were 32,000.
32. Yeah, I mean, I'd do that every year for if it can realize this kind of a difference for us, especially in those tough years
idea.
we went through. You like it, right? All right, see me later. No.
Staff not so happy about that. And so staff put together these nice summary tables that we'll just kind of have in the background as we go through this. This first one here breaks it out by kind of departmental grouping, administrative services, building and safety, and so on, which identifies the revenue cost and, most importantly, the possible new revenue in the far right-hand column there, breaking out the public works services that come out, those costs and those come out of the water fund, and those revenues, of course, will go back into the water fund. So the general fund piece of it would show an increase of 361, with the about 240 going to the enterprise fund. And so let me just kind of run through these here. We'll just keep these up and refer to them as we need to. Schedule of the new fees where there wasn't a fee before. So things like short-term rental registration, credit card processing, water meter upgrades, backflow device program being kind of the larger dollar amounts. Those fees that we're recommending going down because, of course, you can't charge more than the cost reasonably borne. So we have a number of fees that, because things have changed, as Greg mentioned, the processes have changed, costs have changed over the last 10 years. There's some fees where we're actually cost less to do. And so we're recommending reductions in those fees.
Sorry, I have a burning question. So you do this with many government agencies. That's what your wheelhouse. Do you have benchmarks on some of these hours per activity by department? I'd love to see those. Is that part of this report?
Well, they're not formal benchmarks. I tried to create a formal benchmark process years ago when I had all this data of all these times from all these cities and found out that it was just all over the board. from the standpoint of, for instance, in planning a conditional use permit. Every city has a conditional use permit, but not every city defines it the same way, does it the same way. And so what I'm looking at as I'm going through the process with staff is different pieces of it. That when you do the review, it should be in the ballpark at this time. When you do different parts of it, it should be in the ballpark of this time. And to the extent that it's not, I'll push back, why is that? And oftentimes, well, we do this, this, and this. Our code says this, this, and this. And there's oftentimes good reasons why it's different. And usually there are very good reasons why it's different, because every city does it.
Yeah, no, the reason I bring it up is we're changing technology, using technology differently through the city. Haven't done it to a great extent yet. I think payroll is probably some of the payroll pay stub stuff, the online business permits. But when we continue to make these changes, we should be more effective and efficient as an organization. So these are based on the assumption that each department is maximum productivity or ideal productivity.
We don't really get into productivity.
Right. So
we're saying this is what is occurring today.
Yeah. So I would just like to see, Eric, if you have it, even if you're concerned about the CUP being different in one agency versus another, I would like to see what those benchmarks are if you have them available.
Like I said, it's not something that's written down. It's not something that with these different pieces of the process, these different cities have this kind of time detail. So I don't have something of that nature. It's
maybe
really
that's something that, Joe, we could, because I was under the impression that as part of the strategic planning, when we authorized this work, that would include some activity-based costing, but also look at benchmarks. And are we missing a best practice in another city, for example, because they're doing something differently than what we could be doing? So maybe that's something we could look at. There's got to be firms that do that as well, right?
Is that also something that could be provided by the League of Cities or independent cities?
Probably.
They might have that sort of
Yeah.
data available.
I would think so. Okay, thanks.
And then another question, if, this may be for you, David King, if a city charges fees for services that are over and above the cost of providing those services, then that's not proper, and does that maybe trigger, if the city wants to continue doing it, that they have to go to the voters for what's essentially a tax increase for the over and above? Is that the 218?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Dr. Brand. So in order to qualify as a fee that it can be approved by the city council, it has to be the city recovering its reasonable costs. So anything above that would be considered a tax, so it would have to go to the voters.
So politically, that comes about when people paying the fees feel they're excessive, and they take an action to push the city to justify it, and they do a study like this when they can't, but the city won't stand down from that level charge, then you need to go to the ballot, right?
Yeah, exactly right. So it would require a filing of a lawsuit against the city. The city would reevaluate its fee and then probably do another fee study. The only time it would result really in litigation would be if the city wanted to continue to impose the fee. So you're exactly right.
And then lastly, just a summary of what's the revenue you're getting from increases fees, what's the minus revenue you're getting from decrease of fees, and what's the revenue you're getting from introducing new fees, and how we got to the 602,000. And in addition, what we didn't have in the original report we presented a month ago, we've since completed the recreation services report, and so that will be a whole, I hope, separate discussion, because those fees are different. We're not just going to say this is what the costs are, you should charge the costs. These are all market-based fees, and we're going to be more looking for some policy recovery goals, so that staff can move forward and act on those policy recovery goals in a way that still works within their market. So I hope to get into that also. And so question now is, how do you want to proceed? Oftentimes what works well is staff has prepared this big sheet of all the proposed fees, current fees and proposed fees and all the services. Oftentimes what works well is kind of going through by page and identifying by page those things you have questions on, those things that you have issues with the recommendation. So we're not necessarily going through something that you guys all agree on, we're good, we can move on. So if we can deal with it by exception, that'll help us get through everything here this afternoon.
I'd like to ask a couple questions about some of the line items, just to get a better understanding of it. The credit card, AD004 is a reference number, credit card processing, $95,000. Does that include the online business renewal? Because if not, it's going to be a much different number, I think, right?
Mayor Pro Tem Boyles, that does not include the new online business license transactions. So what we did do is look at transactions for 2017, and that totaled about $95,000 in credit card fees. And looked at how many transactions there were, and that's how we came up, Eric came up with this 2.75% in order to recoup our fees. With the online business license right now, so for this current year, we're anticipating about $120,000 in credit card fees. And that will just continue to go up next year, probably $130,000 to $150,000.
This idea is whatever our fee is, 2.5% or whatever, we just pass that through to the consumer?
Correct, if they're using a credit card, correct. So when they pay online, we'll use the business license online process, for example. You can pay via credit card up to $5,000. So if the charge is $5,000 or more, then our policy does not permit them to use a credit card. Or they can also use an electronic check. There is no fee for the user to use an electronic check.
Is the 5,000 because we're with a merchant where we don't have established a credit card processor, we don't have established history, or is that something we could change?
No, I believe, and Greg might want to chime in if I'm not speaking correctly here, but I believe several years ago, in order to contain credit card fees that the city was experiencing, the city treasurer recommended putting a cap on that, because before, I guess, there was no cap, and we were experiencing very high credit card fees.
Yeah, that's
so
correct.
we could revisit that for sure.
We could, for sure. Particularly if we're going to recapture those charges.
Okay. The other question was related to AD001, short-term rental registration, which we don't have currently. I'm assuming that's anticipating that going forward. I see Sam nodding back there. And then secondly, does that include compliance? Because part of what we had talked about is the challenge inherent with rolling out this new system, and how do we monitor?
I believe that's just the initial issuance of an application.
So we might want to consider, my point is, we might want to consider an activity around who has a short-term rental if we have a regulation. There's going to be an enforcement or compliance component to that, right? I would think, and I would want to build that into the fee as well.
I don't know where we're going to land on this issue, but if we do adopt a short-term rental ordinance and application process, we would likely build into that a condition that they cover any costs associated with future compliance.
Okay.
And have the operators sign that and come to an agreement that they're going to cover those costs if the permit's issued.
Okay, thank you.
So, Mayor, I think we're looking for some direction on how to proceed with the rest of this meeting, and Eric has suggested that we use the department by department detail sheet as a way of walking through what the current fees are, what the proposed fees are. There are new fees that are highlighted in the, is that yellow?
And so just so you can reference back to the report to the extent you need to, the reference numbers on the left-hand side match up with the Appendix A reference numbers, which of course then match up with the detailed Appendix B reference numbers.
And these are the non-recreation
Correct.
fees.
There's a separate one for
when we
recreation.
get through this, we were going to have a conversation about this.
Did you ask me?
So I guess I can walk through these one at a time and we can decide whether we have issue. The short-term rental registration fees proposed at 100% cost recovery at the $200 per application and $155 per renewal, and that is dependent upon council actually adopting a short-term rental ordinance. And I'll just walk through these and tell me if you have questions or want to discuss what the proposed fee is. The film permit processing fees, you can see there are a number of those, about half of which are based on the actual hourly costs for personnel. And Eric, I assume we've increased that hourly cost based on new benefit benefit costs and, okay. So those hourly costs are going to float based on the personnel assigned, for instance, to a police officer assigned to a filming event. The significant increase there is really in the permit application fee from $640 to $1,225.
Why does that, what's involved in a permit application?
It's really working with the film company and going through what they want to do, getting the insurance requirements, making sure that all the specs of what they want to do and where they want to film is appropriate. And so, if you look at that detail on Appendix B, you'll see there's multiple departments involved. So the big amount of time is the revenue inspector in finance, but you've in the license permit specialist, but you've also got engineering, police, fire, all having a voice in making sure that that film permit does not negatively impact the rest of the community. And so it's almost 9 hours of total staff time to process a film permit.
So have we looked at what the other rates are across other local cities?
We have not. I try and say this is what the cost is here. I can tell you that this fee will be higher than a lot of other cities. This is something that is really variable by community depending on the type of the amenities in that community that people want to film. So it's to a large degree market-based.
That looks to me 9 hours of back and forth on a film permit. Just seems like an opportunity for technology.
Yeah.
Potentially. I mean, is this a manual process where people are walking between departments?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think this could be really streamlined, so it's an online process.
Well, that's an opportunity
Juliana's
for
saying yes.
improvement, but it's an opportunity for improvement, but right now this is based on actual.
No, I know.
But I don't want to price ourselves out of the market.
Well, it's not really our market. I mean, we're just collecting our costs for it. The real cost is people who rent locations. That's where the big money is. This actually is noise for production companies. I've been told multiple times that we don't charge anything. So.
Yeah, no, I'm not worried about the fee, Suzanne, as much as I am about I'd also be frustrated if I was a location company with the back and forth would be. So I'm just, if something, not that we're going to change the fee necessarily today, I'm just making note of it, something we might want to address going forward as a potential opportunity for improvement, that's all.
Mayor Pro Tem, just to address that, we are looking at internal processes right now to come to council possibly within the next 2 or 3 months to change some of the processes for the film permits.
Right, and it's similar to block parties, right? We have signing parties now, I think, but before it used to be the person applying for the block party had to go from department to department to department and find somebody in that day, somebody who used to pull
Correct.
block party
Right,
permits.
and our turnaround time right now for film permits is 48 hours.
So to that end, so now I'm thinking about the changes that Sam has started to embark upon and talking about with his department, where he's going to have a more business-friendly or service center type approach where you can get these things done. So once these changes are made, are we going to go back and readdress our fees potentially, and at what timeline?
That would be the following
year in the
so
budget
that's why
process.
each year I would like to bring the master fee schedule, all the fees, and highlight certain ones that maybe there was some operational changes that are have a major impact on the outcome of the fee that we would touch on. CPI increase, pension increases. So all that would be encompassing in the discussion on an annual basis.
Because what I heard is we can't make a profit, but we can collect our costs. So we have to look at them continuously.
Yeah.
Correct. And also if we become more efficient and that fee requires a reduction, that would also have to.
Thank you.
So I'm going to just kind of work my way down the list and just please jump in.
I do want to just ask one philosophical question to the council. So if we know that we are going to be making some immediate changes in the near future to policy practices that's going to streamline some of this stuff, are we sure we want to go up and down in our pricing and our fees? So like if we know that, say just the film permit, we're going to be improving that process to reduce the timeline down from 48 hours to 2. Or do we really want to keep going up back and forth on the fees? I mean, we're just going to be.
But until we make those improvements, Carol, I mean, Eric said something profound. If you spend $1 on special services, that's $1 for community services you don't have. So we really do need to collect them, and we can, change them.
Yeah, I just want to just be cognizant of, it may look a little, it's adding more work. And now you're going to have to go back and adjust these. If we know these are changing in the near future, I just want to, it's more of a philosophical question. We haven't changed them in 10 years, and now all of a sudden we're going to be changing them like every 6 months.
I think that shows us being sensitive to the market and charging what the costs are. And if the costs improve, then the consumer gets the benefit.
Okay, it just seems kind of impractical, but I understand the philosophy. I mean, I understand that we need to charge people for the cost to doing the business, but we know we're going to be changing this process in the near future. What's the near future? 2 months, 3 months? I
guess I like it better though than
yeah, exactly.
once every decade. I like it better jerked around every 6 months or year and a half. I prefer that to neglecting it for 10 years.
Yeah, exactly. But
If I could just make one more comment on the film permit. So Juliana did look at what other cities are doing in our region, and it's a wide range. There's some as low as 200, and there were some as high as close to 2,000. I'd probably say that the mean was right around $600.
Yeah. I just also would hate for us to price ourselves out of a certain market where we can people can get some revenue.
Right, but it's not our market. We don't benefit from filming in town.
Yeah.
Other than the pride of seeing El Segundo in
In film.
something. There's no money made. I mean,
Well, I think some of the merchants might benefit. I mean, I know they have craft services, but there's probably some ancillary benefit. But okay, I think we're
we can
moving
keep
on.
going.
Right?
I just want
So, Joe, I think as a placeholder standpoint for the budget process, the way I'm seeing it, I just want to see if we're seeing this kind of the same way, is when we look at fees and the percent of revenue, there's an opportunity, I think, at each year to say, have there been any significant changes in the process, the way in which we do things in the city in any one of these different departments? And if so,
Correct.
use the same hourly baseline that he used, that Eric used, and redo the math. And then in future years, we've already got the baseline. We know what the process is involved, how many man hours, women hours are required to get something done. Then we can add some pension factor in years 2, 3, 4, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's still coming back every 5 years and doing the comprehensive fee study by an outside firm, just to reaffirm we're on the right track.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
All right, so I'm just going to quickly go down the list and kind of describe each one briefly. NSF check processing, someone writes the city a bad check, currently charging $25. It's costing $90 to process that, plus your bank is charging you a fee in addition to that, so we've included those costs. We did make a distinction that if this is your first NSF check, we're only going to charge you $45 or half the cost, but everyone thereafter is the full cost, $90.
Why would that be?
Being nice.
I thought we had to charge the
You don't
cost.
have to charge. You don't have to charge the full
Okay.
cost.
You can
can't
subsidize,
overcharge.
right? Okay.
And so we made a distinction for, maybe someone that just got caught up in,
I don't think that's common practice anymore.
it's not. It's
Yeah.
an unusual fee. It's something came up with some feedback from staff. And so, of course, it's up to you to decide
well, if
if you want,
council
what you want to
wants
do.
$90 off the bat, that's.
Well, what about bad debt? Is bad debt factored in here? Uncollectible checks? How
No.
do we handle that?
That's basically it's not a fee.
What is
for
our
recovery.
uncollectible debt on an annual basis?
So we've done a pretty aggressive job at cleaning that up, working with the various departments, fire, police, Juliana and her area. So right now, I don't have the number off the top of my head, but it's not a material amount, and we use a collection agency for that amount. And I want to say, it's a couple $100,000 a year, maybe.
Is sort of the collection agency fees factored in?
Not to this, no.
No, so what happens is, we send that bad debt off to the collection agency after we've exhausted all of our resources.
Yeah, no, I get that part, but I mean, you probably have percentages of how many on average are uncollectible that have to go off, and
Right.
how old they are in an AR aging process. But I would like to see that built in. I don't know why we wouldn't charge somebody.
Well, yeah,
for
this
that.
is the processing cost of an NSF check. That's what we're recovering through this fee. There, you know, to the extent that you want to have a collection fee on top of that, sometimes we'll see that in the library, that in that area. Typically don't see it in general city functions.
Where are most of the checks written? Is it in the library or?
Oh, NSF checks? No.
No, it's probably be.
Well, we only get about 20 NSF checks a year.
Okay.
It's not even really
That's
material
great. Thank you.
discussion.
Okay, thank you, checks.
Joe, would you like to sit next to the city clerk and maybe share her microphone so you're not?
Sure,
back and
absolutely.
That's a
forth?
good idea.
The next service is copy service, copy document reproduction service, covered under the Public Records Act. You're only allowed to charge the cost of reproduction. We're not making any change here. We are still keeping the first 5 copies free, just because that's the vast majority of the Public Records Act requests, and collecting change to the counter and getting an extra 40 cents here is really not helpful. So we're recommending no change there. Document certification, certifying a city document as an actual true copy of a city document. No change there. Video audio copying, $10 per tape or disc. Again, just the reproduction of files onto a disc. Initiative processing, the $200 fee, which is the state maximum. You're allowed to charge for a local initiative, for someone to file a local initiative. No change there. Then we get into building and safety. So, as we've talked about, we're recommending some big changes in building and safety. The city policy for years has been to subsidize residential permits and plan checks and charge full cost for commercial, industrial, and other. As the types of projects, especially on the commercial side, has changed, where you're having a lot more of these very large projects, the top end of the commercial fee schedule was really over recovering too much. And so we made some adjustments to lower the commercial fee schedule, especially at the top end. But at the same time, we're increasing the residential schedule to recover its cost. So we're recommending full cost recovery for all parts of building safety, including residential, which would be a policy change. But again, that is something that is fairly common, full cost recovery for everybody for building and safety. That's the broad stroke.
So we've been trying to save up money to get a new general plan. Are these reductions have any impact on that?
No, that's a separate fee, and I believe that fee is staying unchanged, but that would be a separate fee, and that money would be set aside separately from all of this.
But it's a percentage of it.
Right. And so we did look at, if the fees were in place, are we still collecting enough money for the general plan? So yeah, we looked at that piece.
Okay, thanks.
And one distinction is that a residential fee for building and planning could be a commercial speculative.
Could be.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I support that. Do we vote on each of these, or how are we doing this? We're just kind of going through them all, or?
Yeah, I think we're just kind of getting the general feedback from the
Okay.
council, and staff will bring back a resolution that they think fits within that feedback, but at the end of the day, you will vote on whether or not we all got it right.
When is that, Abe?
And then the stockpile borrow site plan check is not something that's provided as a separate fee any longer. It's just part of the building plan services to the extent that there's stockpiles. Any other questions on building safety before we move on past that?
The only thing is, we had talked about putting a tax or a fee to help for art and culture. Did we want to,
My understanding is that you're going to come forward with a second.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's looking forward, a 1% probably fee on commercial development.
Yeah, that would be more of akin to a development impact fee.
Right.
And it would probably be handled separately from this. This is more just cost recovery of the city's, ongoing
Right.
costs.
okay.
Yeah. Good though, Carol.
Okay, engineering? All right. Encroachment permits, we did a lot of changes on this one. It's the service is being provided differently, and so we really broke down the different steps that was involved in this. came up with an issuance cost, a review cost, and inspection cost for a typical 50 linear foot project. So these are sidewalks, curb, gutters, as well as utilities we have separate. So mostly sidewalk, curb, gutter, but it could, I take it back, could be a utility street cut is included in here also. So at the end of the day, the total revenues are going down. We've restructured how it's being paid. And so the very smallest ones are probably paying a little bit more. The very biggest ones are probably paying a little bit less. But it's now more reflective of what the costs are today. Okay. Excavation permit and utility street cut permit were broken out separately before. We've pulled all those together within this encroachment permit, EN01. Long-term encroachment agreement is, more of a permanent encroachment. That's actual cost. Traffic control plan review. We just had a street closure review before, and we've really broken out the different pieces of that. So to the extent that, there's work being done in the right-of-way, it's impacting the traffic, they're required to do a traffic control plan. There's different levels of effort involved with that. So we had a minor traffic control plan, arterial lane closure, a major arterial closure, so different pieces of that just at the plan review side. And then we didn't have anything on the inspection side, a fee for that. So we've added in fees for traffic control inspections, going by and making sure that all the traffic control devices are set up properly. So we have a first day and then each additional day, so depending on how long that project's out there with their traffic control devices.
Eric, if I could just make a comment. I see Dr. Brown looking through the book. So, Council, if you want, we're also following along the book here, is details of the fee. So as Eric is going down this handout that you have in front of you, it's also following in line with the fees in the book. So if you wanted to see the details, they are in there. And it's in order.
Yes, but there's no page numbers.
Yeah, right. In the upper right-hand corner, there's the reference number.
So, we're on EN005 right now.
Mm-hmm. So for major arterial closures, if we have to work with Caltrans, if it's Sepulveda or Pacific Coast Highway, are those separate costs, or? I see heads shaking up and down, yes.
Why is a second or third, why are additional days less?
There's the upfront work to get that established, and usually there's more time spent that first day to make sure everything was set up correctly. And so it should be less time for each ensuing days, as long as they haven't moved stuff around. Okay. Moving along, news rack permit. We just have a minor change to that, just going from 105 to 115. News rack impoundment, not making any change there. And then we get into more of the development. On the engineering side, we have a final map check. Eventually, on the planning side, we'll see a tentative map. That's more of a planning fee, so that's under planning. The final map, when it comes in for its meets and bounds, is more of an engineering fee. So we are seeing some big increases there based on the effort of the staff to process these. Because we also have, there'll also be surveyor costs in addition to that. So they're contract surveyor that the city uses. So the cost we have here is just for staff, and then plus actual cost of surveyor. Okay. Page 1. Moving on to page 2. All right, then we have final map amendment. A large change there. Again, just trying to reflect the time, plus surveyor cost. We get into public improvement plan check. These are more based on construction valuation, so we didn't really have any change there. The public improvement inspection is now part of the encroachment permit we looked at earlier, so there wasn't a need to have a separate construction-based inspection fee for public improvements. Certificate of correction, service is no longer provided, so this will drop off the fee schedule. Record of survey plan check, this fee is going down, again based on the effort that we identified. Easement processing, time and materials. Surety and subordination review, there wasn't a need for a separate fee, so it's provided as part of the cost and other fees that require bonds, and so this drops off as a separate fee. Lien removal service no longer provided, so it drops off also. Minor plan check revision has a minor increase, 305 to 350 per sheet. And then there's a whole list here that are actual time and materials. So street name change, alley street vacation review, assessment district formation research, city property acquisition processing. So the applicant would put up a deposit and staff would charge against that, and to the extent there's any money left over, it would be refunded to the applicant. Wide and overload permit, these fees are set by the state for wide loads going through town. Blueprint copy service, no longer provided as hard copies, so this fee would go away. Industrial waste permit and inspection. This, when we did this 10 years ago, this was under the fire department. It's now under engineering, so the costs related to that have gone down, so we've decreased the fees here. Same thing with the revised industrial waste permits and the industrial waste annual inspections. Okay. Stormwater inspection, these are inspections of businesses, so we're showing some larger increases here depending on the type of business. And so these are all the things to make sure that they're conforming to the NPDES stormwater requirements, that these businesses have unique responsibilities because of the type of business. We're rolling. All right, then that gets us into, that was engineering. That gets us into fire. Okay, the fire sprinkler plan check and inspection, still staying valuation based, but we've just made some adjustments to exactly what that valuation is. So it should have a minor increase in the fee. Same thing with the fire alarm plan check and inspection and the fire extinguishing system plan check and inspection. Fire protection testing has gone down quite a bit, the effort involved, so the fee is going down quite a bit. Annual business fire inspection, so the time spent to inspect by the fire department for life and safety purposes the businesses within the city, depending on the size. These are the engine company inspections, and so those fees are going up quite a bit based on the effort and the time and the cost. So some larger increases for the first inspection, and then there's the reinspection fee. Those were already fairly high, so they're going up, but not as much as the first inspections. Okay, annual fire permit for some high hazard occupancies for the California Fire Code. So these fees are actually going down a little bit. Again, based on I think this was more of a staffing change to a less expensive position. Temporary fire permit, again, going down a little bit for the same reason. Fire high-rise inspection going up just a little bit for the inspections of the high-rise buildings for, again, life and safety purposes.
Council understands that this, in some cases, we had a manager or supervisor doing the work 10 years ago, which were related in a higher cost. If we've pushed that work down in the organization, it's going to lower the cost.
Yes, we have a specialist doing this now instead of the fire marshal.
Just out of curiosity, what's the definition of a high-rise?
More than 4? 70 feet or higher.
Okay, thank you, sir.
We have 21.
Thank you.
21?
Okay, state mandated fire inspections going down just a little bit. Special fire equipment inspection and approval going down also.
Okay.
A new construction fire reinspection. Still charging the fully allocated cost, but we expect that as the hourly rates are lower for the positions doing it, go down. After hours inspection, just charging the actual cost. Then we get into the Coupa stuff. So hazardous material inspection program. So with all the Coupa stuff, we really broke it down, and Victor spent a lot of time breaking out the different components of this and identifying what is the time we're spending now, what is the staffing we have now. And so there are some larger changes on this one. some of them down, some of them up. But we do feel it is definitely reflective of not only the responsibilities of today, which are different than 10 years ago, but the effort that goes into it by the city. Okay, so the hazardous material inspection program, those fees are going down somewhat, depending on what level, what range they're at, what size they're at. The CalARP program, the Chemical Accident Release Prevention Program, the costs are going up quite a bit, but there is, at the top end, they really did a good job of what does Chevron cost? What is the effort we're spending with Chevron? And I know they've been working with Chevron to identify those costs, and when we looked at it, it came into about the same cost as what they'd already talked about with Chevron, about the $140,000 a year is the effort that city staff spends to make sure that Chevron is keeping up on its chemical release policies and procedures.
I'm sure they appreciate that, just for...
Yes.
I don't...
Okay, any questions on this before we move to the next page? All right, so more of the Coupa stuff, hazardous waste generator permit. These fees are going up somewhat. Again, depends. We changed the categories on this, so it's hard to do an apples to apples, but at the end of the day, it should be a little bit more revenue. Tiered hazardous waste permit processing. These fees are going up quite a bit. Programs have changed, and the effort involved has changed quite a bit. Underground tank permit. These fees are going up somewhat.
I know.
Above ground tank permit. These fees are going up quite a bit. So I believe there was some subsidy level at the lower end last time. We're saying this is what it costs. This is what the fee should be this time. So some larger increases there. Hazmat response, that's just actual cost. Environmental safety enforcement inspection, again, actual cost. That's a new fee. And then the review of the risk management plan was an actual cost. That one will go away because it's now part of the hazardous waste permit fee. And that's fire and Coupa services. All right, moving on to library. Down library, we're going to see subsidies here. It costs certain things to process a new library card. It costs certain to process interlibrary loans and library item reservation. But to a large extent, these are market-based fees. These are fees that you can cost yourself out of the market, as it were, and this is, most communities want to encourage use of their library. And so some of these we will have recommended subsidies. The new library card processing is no change on this one. This is actually right around, if you were to charge residents, volunteers, and within the Southern California area, it would be about $8. But we're not recommending any charge on this. Most libraries do not charge to get a library card. Some do, most don't. This community has not for people in the community that are within the area. Library replacement card processing going from $2 to $3. That's actually full cost, so no subsidy there. Interlibrary loan processing. This is something that's typically heavily subsidized, and we're recommending that here. Within the area, it's $1 per item. If it's something outside of the library network, it's $2 plus postage. Cost is about $23. So this is something that you're recovering about 5% of your cost. But we do feel that if you were to charge more, people would not do it, and the library experience would be diminished. So that's why we did not recommend a change here. Library item reservation, same kind of thing. It's currently $1. Cost is about $5. So we're recommending a subsidy and no change in the fee here. Overdue library item processing, we do have a minor change here, going from 20 cents to 25 cents a day. Just to kind of keep up a little bit, but to the extent you charge too much, then you won't see that item again. So we do want to encourage them to return the item, so that's the... Lost library item replacement. There's a processing fee plus replacement cost. That's going from $5.15 to $10, which is still only recovering about 20% of the processing cost. You know, when an item gets lost, there's a lot of effort that goes into reordering, getting it back on the shelves again. So we did feel that going from 5 to 10 was something that would work within the market, that 50 would create all kinds of unintended consequences. Internet printing at the library, going from 15 cents a page for black and white to 20 cents, 75 cents to $1 for color.
You okay with that? $1? Seems pretty high for.
So you work with library manager to bring reasonableness to this?
Absolutely.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I also spoke to the library board last week. They approved, they recommended approval of it.
Thanks.
Library facility rental, we did have a little bit of a breakout there. Resident, nonprofit, currently it's just nonprofit, for-profit. We broke out resident, non-resident within each of those categories with some different fees there. The resident nonprofit will still be paying.
Can you clarify? These seem to be calculated differently. Is this market rate, or how are these?
It is market rate.
That's allowed, obviously.
Right. You can charge the market rate for rental of city assets. Notice that currently the nonprofit organization pays $10 per rental. So they could have it all day and they pay $10. We're recommending that go to $10 per hour, which we feel is still quite a bargain. So that for those groups that have longer rentals, it would definitely impact them.
How are you factoring the, okay. You're assuming the executive assistant is the biggest component of the cost, right? Actually just
Right. She spends
booking
half
those
of her
rooms.
time just dealing with rentals of the rooms.
So
at the
let's
library.
just say that we had technology for that, because corporations have done that for a long time, booking meeting rooms, right? Web enabled, et cetera. Can you factor the technology cost into that?
You can. And you could, if there's less time involved, you could factor that in. But at the end of the day, because these are rental fees, these are really more market-based fees. We're going to say, here's the cost, you should know what the costs are, but when you're setting this fee, charge it based on what the people are willing to pay for it. And now there's different breaks you may want to give to different groups within the community, and you certainly have that right. Right now you have the nonprofit, for-profit. Like I mentioned, we broke out resident, non-resident within those categories. But we are recommending some increases because we feel it is very much under market.
Do we know what the utilization is, roughly?
I believe it's very heavy, if I remember right, of the library.
Yes, Mark.
Because this is a big line item, $168,000 subsidy we're talking about, right? If I'm reading this correctly.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, Mayor Fuentes.
Mark.
Yes, the room is heavily used. It's used by the library for programs, obviously, but then any day, almost every day, there is a group in there, and quite often the group is reserved at day.
Okay.
I know the challenges I had when I used to reserve it for the El Segundo High School Alumni Association. It would be difficult to get because there were groups from out of town who would come in, nonprofits, and they would get it all day long. And then our very own groups in town didn't have access to it. So I support this.
Yes, that is correct. That a lot of the rentals are from out of town profits.
And then since the price is so cheap, it's easier for them just to rent it for the whole day. If it's only $10, they're just going to rent it for the whole day rather than actually the times that they actually want it.
Yeah, when I saw $10 per rental, I thought that was a typo. Yeah. Turned out it wasn't.
So today at 4 o'clock, the Friends of the Library meet down there.
Yes, that's correct.
And
They'll be in the Friends of the Library.
They won't be paying any fee, correct?
No.
Just want to be sure.
Because they're our friends. They're our friends. But, you know, there's also so many other facilities in town. We just had our EDAC meeting yesterday at Cross Campus, which has these conference rooms available. So this isn't the only place that nonprofits from out of town can go. They have lots of opportunities in El Segundo, places to go, El Cross, Biz House, all those places. So thank you.
Yeah, to me, these rates still seem like a $5 differential, resident versus non-resident. Or no, I'm sorry. For-profit is 30 an hour. You're saying non-resident 45. Okay, so 50%. Yeah, okay. So the subsidy that on this table, Eric, is pre.
That's including the 50% of the executive assistant, but also we allocated part of the maintenance and replacement of the library based on the square footage of that room to this service also.
So even with these changes, we'll still be subsidizing to the tune of
Heavily
160,000.
Yeah, it's a big expense, it's a big effort by the library staff, and so that subsidy would continue just at a lesser rate.
Right, depending on the rooms, there's the setup, the tables, if it's conference rooms set up as used or, you know.
Yeah, are there different rates per room?
There is the study room, but this is the one, it has different rates per room.
And then how does this compare to like Joslin Center? I know AYSO and some other sports organizations have held meetings at Joslin Center. Is there a fee associated with that? I know we're getting into recreation later, but I'm trying to.
Because there's the Rose View room and there's the Friends of the Library room, two very different rooms.
Yes, the large Friends of the Library room and the Rose Garden gazebo rooms would be this rate. The smaller study rooms would be the $5 per hour for adults and for profit.
But you can get like 6 people in there, right?
Yes, that's correct.
I think that's too cheap. I think.
For profit.
Yeah, I would agree.
So we'd like
I
them
think
to come back with.
Yeah, I think we could revisit some of the fees on these the rooms and be a little more aggressive. I mean, $160,000 subsidy for meeting rooms,
I agree.
especially if it's booked. If it's booked and people aren't able to get in them,
Right.
you know. I would like to see Mark's group come back with some, or however you do that, Eric. I'm not sure, but.
Well, depending on how you want to conclude today, if we're going to go forward on April 17th with all of these, we could go with the fees as they're listed and come back, go work with the library board and come back with a potential second adjustment to those rental rates.
Silly question, but I have to ask, the building repair and maintenance that you factor in, that's prevailing wages, all that, right, or public works?
It's the public works staff time spent at the library. We identified that cost. We allocated that to the library. A part of that, based on the square footage, went to these rooms, and so part of that effort got allocated to these rooms because they're rentals.
And do these rooms have, it's been a long time, I used to go and study in there when I was in school, but do they have AV capability? I don't remember.
Technology.
I don't know. AV, nodding yes.
'Cause I think also, I haven't not been in there a while, if there's an opportunity to use some of these fees, increase the fees and make the experience even better for the people that are in there, you know, well.
And I think you're right. This is a great opportunity for technology to take on part of the reservation task, and we talked about working with the Rec One software potentially to see if we could utilize that for part of this function. Free up the executive assistant's time at the library.
Right.
For other things.
So I'm sure there's a way to code it as such. The one thing of working with Jessie, say at the library, is she knows who's in town and who's not, or just, you know,
It can be a little
the
tricky.
relationships.
Sometimes you'll have one person who's a resident and everybody else is non-resident, and that's why they go through that one person. So there's people will play games with that, and to the extent that you have somebody there who knows the community, it makes it easier to get around those games, but there's always.
If you got to do it through Rec One, there's probably some validation though, single sign-on. You have to have a Rec Park ID, right?
Yeah.
So it's just.
So, question though, if you, the costs that are getting allocated to that are, if those rooms disappeared, would those costs disappear, or would they be allocated somewhere else?
If the rooms disappeared, the question would be, does that mean that the maintenance staff spends less time there because it's a smaller building? If the answer to that is yes, then the cost for everybody would go down. If the answer to that is no, then those costs would be reallocated to the rest of the library.
I think Mike was referring to the heavy component of that as the executive assistant time, right?
All the staff and all the other costs. True costs are,
Yeah, if that room went away, that executive assistant, that she spends half her time there, she wouldn't have to spend half her time there. She'd be able to spend, it would be more on the library
her
administration.
costs would be allocated somewhere else.
Exactly.
So, yeah, so that's just a philosophy that I'm kind of struggling with as we go through all of this, to be honest with you, but.
Yeah, and a lot of these, it's a soft cost, as it were, it's.
So they're allocated
It's an
costs.
opportunity cost, that they're not able to do these other things because they're doing these things.
Well.
May not need all the staff.
Then we'll get into the efficiency of it, and we'll get into the productivity of it, and we'll get into a real argument or discussion pretty soon here. Well, that's where it's headed, I think, but. You know, I understand the philosophy, please continue. I just struggle with it.
Okay.
So then, back to your point then, you're recommending that we move forward with these costs and then come back, and then you'll go back to the library with some additional changes?
Well, if we decide to move forward on April 17th, I would recommend that we move forward with the rates as they're proposed. And we'll take the council direction to go back and look at what we can do to both reduce the cost on the rental side, and also talk to the library board about recouping a higher percentage of the actual costs.
And we also like to see the cost for the smaller rooms as well.
The study rooms?
Yeah, the study rooms.
Okay.
Free for students and nonprofits and $5 now. All right, that takes us into planning. Just want to generally say about planning, because there's so many moving parts in a planning application, especially a discretionary one, we broke out the steps involved. And so sat down with Greg, and it had changed quite a bit in the last 10 years. There's a different staff, different responsibilities. And so we really just started over with planning and said, okay, here we had a grid where we had all the steps and all the employees, and for each service went through and filled in that grid and identified, okay, taking in the application, routing the work, doing a site inspection, doing the review, back and forth with the applicant. If it's something that goes to Planning Commission, the time spent to prepare the staff report, the time spent to prepare the PowerPoint. If it's something that goes to City Council, those same types of things, the noticing requirements. And then, depending on what happens to the project, the wrap-up work at the back end. So we did that for these different services here. So when you see the time detail for the breakouts of all these different planning services, know that it was that effort that we went through with staff to make sure that we're capturing everything, but of course not capturing too much of everything. And so another check on that is we took a look at, okay, here's all the time we have identified per service. We identified how many of these you're doing. So we now know how much total time is being spent on these fee services. So we now looked at it by position. So, okay, we've allocated out half of this planner on these fee services. Does that make sense? If it doesn't make sense, then, you know, if that person is supposed to be spending all their time on planning services, what are we missing? If it does make sense, what are the other things they're doing? So the advanced planning time, the general counter and phone time, the general administrative support time. So we've allocated 100% of everybody, but we use that part of the process to make sure that at an aggregate level that what we're coming up with from the detail makes sense. So it was that process that we went through with Greg and Sam. Okay? All right, so there's a lot of permits here, a lot of applications in play.
Now, just also, you know, we are in the process of going to, it's on the queue to put a new system into our planning department, and that will have a huge price tag to it.
Yes.
How do we apply that?
We put that in as part of the overhead cost. So when
And how much, do you remember how much you put in for that?
not off the top of my head.
Because I don't know if that number was fully baked, because we didn't really account for any.
Cost savings?
No, not cost. Well, there will be, but the operational, you know.
Well, I thought you meant the capital investment.
Yeah.
And that.
Yeah. So if there's,
For the project manager costs or anything. I'm not sure if that number was fully baked.
I believe we're talking about collecting that as a surcharge. Is that right?
I hope we're doing it because it's more efficient and we're saving money in the long run. How are we not balancing that in this?
Well, maybe we are. Let's hear what they said. And it was based on the actuals at the time, and now we have Charles. So to
Right.
your point, yeah.
Right. I just know that's in the queue to move forward with that new system, so.
Yeah, because typically we definitely will want to include those costs and take the cost of the system, amortize it over its life, and say this is how much we should recover this
Right.
year.
I'm just not sure if that cost actually included all the project managers, the cost for the project managers to implement it.
It probably did not, because it's basically unknown up front.
Mm-hmm.
That was also an issue with are there going to be time and cost savings because of this?
Right.
And that's an unknown, so we didn't factor that in because we couldn't. And so
while Eric is looking for that,
what we talked about is for the last 5 years, we had a 4% surcharge on permit fees. And it's just something that we collect. And when we have enough money to do projects, such as this year's project was going to be the permit system, we were hoping to continue that surcharge for years to come. So it's built into the fee study.
Yeah, Sam's right.
And does any of that go into the general plan fund, Sam?
Separate surcharge.
That's a separate surcharge.
Thanks, Sam.
We just,
Well, it's that whole idea, if you say you're gonna spend money on something, you gotta set that money aside so that you're actually gonna spend that money on it 4 or 5 years down the road. It's, because the alternative is to say, okay, we're gonna, the cost does exist, it is a cost. We put it in overhead, it becomes part of the cost of the hourly rate. And the city's still receiving that revenue, but if it didn't get set aside in a separate fund with a separate surcharge, then it's easy to lose that, it just goes in the general fund. It gets wrapped up at the end of the fiscal year and then it disappears. So that money that was set aside for capital replacement or general plan update doesn't exist anymore. But yeah, I can get a little.
So I think that's a long way of saying that we have 2 surcharges, one for the general plan update and one for equipment and facilities in planning and building that get attached to planning and building permits, and they go into separate accounts so that they don't get blended into the general fund expenditures at the end of each year. So we have a running total for both the general plan update and the equipment and facilities and planning and building.
Thank you. Does that answer your question?
So going through the planning fees then.
Vast majority are time-based,
Right. Okay. So again, came down to this is how much time was being spent, to the extent that there were some services that are better suited as a deposit because it could be widely varying the amount of time spent. We recommended those as deposit with actual time spent. So just working down the list, administrative use permit, combine multiple zones into one application, that fee is going down a little bit. Conditional use permit, again, combine multiple fees into one application, and these fees are going up. Downtown design review, have different categories than we had before, so it really is a different application than it was, but there are definitely large increases on this application. Variance fee, staying relatively flat, although the fee itself is going down. Adjustment review, creating one simple fee, one category, so minor increase there. Zone text amendment, these are more time and materials, so that was a deposit, will continue to be a deposit. Pre-application review had a large fee currently that we recommend this fee goes away, so that's something that we'll provide as a general service. Traffic study, time and materials. Off-site parking covenant, going up just a smidge. Parking demand shared study review has a flat fee for the planning piece, but actual cost for the traffic engineer. So that flat piece of it's going down. General plan amendment, specific plan review, specific plan amendment, all time and materials. Sphere of influence amendment, annexation request, we have those fees going away since it's not something you're going to be processing. There's not going to be any annexations or sphere changes. Development agreement, time and materials. Coastal development permit, going down a little bit. Fine residential development, time and materials. Fiscal impact analysis is not something that's currently provided, so that fee will go away. Yeah, that was a weird one, yeah. Smoky Hollow, loading zone processing and site plan, those fees will go away also. Density bonus, time and materials. When we get into the CEQA stuff, the environmental stuff, categorical exemptions going up a little bit. Initial study negative declarations going from a flat fee to time and materials. Staff felt that was, because the time could widely vary, that's a better way to do that. EIR will continue to be time and materials, as will mitigation monitoring. Precise plan modification, that's when we're going from a deposit to a flat fee, so staff felt it was, in the time detail we were coming up with showed it was within a narrow enough range to make sense as a flat fee. Then we get into the map stuff. So we had the final map stuff earlier. In engineering, this is more the discretionary side of a subdivision. So the tentative parcel map, fees actually going down a little bit. The tentative track map is staying relatively flat. Resubmitted map, the fees going down. Lot line adjustment, the fees are showing going down, but we also have plus additional contract surveyor costs. So it's hard to say up front because that was all kind of baked into the flat fee before, but now we've broken it out to make sure we're recovering that contract surveyor cost.
But do they pay directly to the contract surveyor, or do we collect those in?
I believe it goes through the city. The contract surveyor. Yeah, it does go through the city, and so it would be a reimbursement for that.
Thank you.
So lot merger, the same thing. Reversion acreage, this fee is going to go away, no longer provided. The certificate of compliance, this fee is probably going to stay relatively flat once we factor in the contract surveyor. Reciprocal access easement, same kind of thing. The flat fees going down plus actual city attorney costs. Same thing with the CC&R review. Historic resource nomination is just going to be an actual time materials instead of a flat fee. Then we get into administrative determinations, both by director and by planning commission, and those fees are going up. Sign program, going from 135 down to 100 for a sign. That's within a sign program. Actually doing that master sign program is either a flat fee or deposit as determined by staff. So if it's something that's going to be a very large sign program, staff will say we need a deposit to track that time. If it's relatively simple, relatively minor, it'll just be that flat fee of $610. Large family daycare permit, fees going up. Move building site plan review, no longer provided, so this fee will drop off the fee schedule. Zoning conformance letter and review, this fee is going down. Modification to discretionary approval, fees going up. Time extension, this is a new fee. If the applicant requests a time extension on their application, no fee currently, so this would be a new fee of $870, again, for an applicant requested time extension. Appeals. In the past, the city has charged full cost for appeals. You see, appeal to the planning commission was $1280, is $1280. We're showing the cost going up to $1360. Appeal to the city council. There's currently a resident subsidy. So if you're a resident and appealing, it's currently a 50% cost recovery. We're recommending that cost subsidy go away, that everybody pay the full cost of $2760. So that's definitely something we'll need you to weigh in from a policy perspective is, do we want to make changes to that? Should residents pay as much as everybody else for appeals to the city council?
I just have to ask one question about this large family daycare permit. Isn't that really just a business? Why do we have to have it under the planning?
This is a new large family daycare. So there's the initial application. Right.
But why is it just a daycare? Like, why is that out of all the businesses why is daycare all of a sudden?
Is that because it would be in a residential area?
Right. I believe because there's zoning issues with that. We want to make sure that's not going to impact the residents.
And is the same?
Is that right?
Would that be the same for senior care, or we have some homes in town for people with different abilities?
Right. It just seems like it's like a target to the daycare centers.
Yeah, I will defer to Greg on.
Large and small family daycares are treated a little bit differently in state law than they're used to set.
What's the difference between a large and a small?
It's the size. I believe it's
more than 6 children.
I think it was 6.
Yeah.
Yeah, 6 children. Fewer is a small family daycare. More would be a large family. And when it's over 8 children in a residential area, it has special impacts, and we have buffers that we check to make sure there's not too many in the same area and so forth. So it's a little different than other uses. The other uses that the mayor mentioned are, by state law, more or less treated as single-family homes. So we don't have the same process for those.
But it just seems like we're penalizing, I mean, I know we have to do extra checks, but we're raising the fee, I don't know, just seems very targeted.
Well, I heard it's the state,
But not the cost, though.
Well, those are the actual costs for
Yeah,
our
there's
time.
costs incurred.
It was subsidized before, I believe. That's still if it's the will of the council.
The county comes out and inspects those daycare centers.
Right, we're not collecting the fee for that, though, but
Right.
have to deal with health department and child welfare.
So if we're going to cover that, we would have to decide if we wanted to cover the costs for other businesses in town as well. So this is a business.
Just a business with
The
unique
cost of
circum-
doing business.
Yeah. It's $100.
Thank you.
Nothing.
Okay, street address change, if someone wants to change their building address, that fee is actually going down a little bit. Takes us to general plan maintenance. So that's the 10% surcharge on building safety permits that exist currently. When we looked at the cost side, we identified ballpark, it's gonna cost about $1.5 million to update your general plan over 10, and so we amortize that over 10 years, so we're saying this fee should recover about $150,000 a year. And so it turned out with the even with the changes in the building safety revenues, that 10% is still a good number.
Is that the 10-year amortization? Is that a standard practice, or okay?
Okay. All right. And on to page 7. Temporary use permit. This fee's going up quite a bit, again, based on the time and effort. Entertainment permit, going up a little bit. Adult use planning permit, this could be more of a time and materials. So that's staying the same. Amplified sound permit, going up quite a bit. Animal permit, have more than the standard number of animals.
Clarify that adult use, is that what,
Yeah.
not what the mayor was talking about? Okay.
Those are adult entertainment.
Animal permit, this fee's going up quite a bit. Animal permit renewal going up a little bit. Animal permit appeals, still keeping the 50% cost recovery on this one, but the fee is still going up quite a bit. A lot of effort that goes into these if someone wants to appeal a staff decision of whether they can have their animal.
How does a non-resident animal factor into this? I'm trying to figure that one out in my head, and I'm struggling with that one here.
I think that
Is that is that like me when I go through another town or something? My non-resident
I
animal?
think
Or
that-
how does that work?
yeah, it
How
could
does
be
that
a
work?
business. Could be a business. Yeah, or somebody right on the border. But
There,
yeah,
yeah,
that's
keep
not
going,
really
keep
a
going,
business,
keep
right?
going.
All right.
Well, we back up? Can you help me understand the difference between amplified sound and entertainment? Sounds like one of the difference is really live performance, but
And amplified sound's more of a one-time thing. It's more of they want to do something in the park that's going to have amplified sound.
okay.
That kind of thing.
The entertainment permit is an annual thing then?
There
Or no?
is, from a planning perspective, it's a one-time thing, but when we get into police, thought we had something for entertainment and police, but I guess not. So the annual piece of it is not something that is we have a fee for.
So just so I'm clear, the one PL 055 is an annual fee to be able to, so like the tavern or something wanted to have live bands on a regular basis? Or the,
Yeah, I believe this is one time when they first want to open up, they first want to establish that, and the zoning requirements related to that.
But the Ed Gala, to your point, would be more of the amplified sound permit for 135?
Correct.
Okay. It's like a backyard party. Someone wants to have a party that's $135, essentially. Okay.
Then we get into business zoning clearance, and so this is related to type time spent to make sure that that business is in the right zone, and then the separate home occupation piece of that. A different effort involved with that to make sure that they're not going to negatively impact their neighbors. Okay? And the public noticing piece, that's just going to be actual cost. We had a flat fee in there before, but then you got to keep up with what the newspaper's charging, so that'll just be an actual cost basis. That's planning.
We want to take a break? Does council want a break?
Sure.
Okay, 10-minute break, 2:31, we'll be back at 2:40.
How we're rolling.
So when those planning.
We are. I didn't want to stop.
Ready for police services.
All right. Starting off with a number of kind of special business permits that if to operate in within the city. There are background checks involved to make sure, because of the type of business, that there aren't any issues with the people running the business. And so we have firearms dealer permit, fees going up quite a bit, fortune teller permit, again, to operate a fortune telling business within the city.
Yes.
Secondhand dealer, pawn shop. So all these fees are going up a fair amount.
What's the difference between a secondhand dealer and a pawn shop?
I believe there are specific state laws that talk specifically about a pawn shop.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
No, well,
right.
You're right. And
There's a lot of different issues involved with a pawn shop versus like an antique store or
yes. Okay.
Consignment store.
Thank you.
But all could involve stolen goods. Bingo permit. There is a state law limiting the fee for most bingo licenses, but you are allowed to charge for remote caller permit if you're literally the caller's off-site, which doesn't happen very often. So most of them will be limited to the $50 fee. Police massage establishment. So a new operating a massage business within the city.
Is that for police only? Is that what I'm?
Yes.
Is that how I read that? Am I reading that right?
Why is that?
That there's no fee for that.
I'm looking at you, Evansky. What are you?
Massage therapist. This is just for those therapists that don't have a state license. If they have a state license, that comes under that. Auction house, pool room, tobacco permit, and then a miscellaneous police business permit, just kind of a catch-all if there's any things that, because of the type of business, the police department feels a background check is needed on the operators. It's to handle those types of things. Concealed weapons permit, limited by state law, so no change there. Clearance form letter, so basically a local background check. Fees staying the same. Same thing for a local records check. Citation sign-off, signing off a fix-it ticket, going up from $10 to $15. Vehicle impound release. So we have some big changes here. And so it wasn't necessarily big changes in the time and the cost, although there was some increases. It was more that this fee was subsidized in the past, and so we're saying that this fee should be actual cost, full cost recovery. So that's why there's some large increases there.
And is that separate from the actual towing? Do they pay that to the contractor? Yes, I'm
Tow
saying
company
yes,
would
they
be
do.
separate, yeah. Okay. Police false alarm response. We're not recommending any change to the fee there. The goal of this, of course, is not to raise money, but to make sure people get their alarm fixed. And so the police department felt that that was set at the right level to do that. Police alarm permit, registering your permit. And so no fee to register your permit. It's just actually no change in the basically violation. If you get a false alarm and they respond and find out you didn't have an alarm permit, you're paying $160 for that. So more to encourage people to register their alarms so they know who to contact when an alarm goes off. Where am I? DUI collision response. So you're allowed to charge the actual cost to respond to a emergency response to a DUI accident up to $12,000. So there's no change there. Second response callback, if you got to go back out a second time to a loud party or any noise disturbance, it'd be an actual cost for that second response. So that first response, that warning response, would still be no charge. And again, this fee is more intended to get people to quiet down. And so it's kind of a threat that if we come back out, it's going to cost you. Turn down the sound. Misdemeanor booking service. This is if people receive a misdemeanor citation and they're required by the courts to come in and get booked. That process is going up just a little bit from $215 to $245. A DUI arrest, fee's actually going down as far as looking at the time spent to be collected upon conviction. Special event police service, the time spent for police personnel at special events, private special events. This would be an actual cost basis based on the fully burdened rate, so no change there.
I just have one question. So back to the second response callback. So if, in the case of there's loud music, at that time, at what point do they check to see if there's a permit pulled for an amplified sound? And if they find out that that person didn't have a permit, is there an additional charge?
I don't believe so. No, it's typically these are a large part of them are house parties where it's.
But I'm just saying because we're increasing the amplified sound cost permit quite hot. I mean, it's going up quite a bit.
And I don't know.
So are we just discouraging people from pulling the permit? And now, you see what I mean?
And I'm not sure if amplified sound permit is required for a house party.
Right, I know this goes back before you, Chief, but there have been parties that the neighbors have called because there's so many people and they're spilling outside and making noise, and there's not necessarily amplification.
So, Mayor, Council, these would actually be two separate issues. Even if you had a permit for amplified sound, if people called and complained about the noise, you could generate a police response. We would go out the first time and we would say, you're now disturbing the peace. Quiet it down. If we come out again, you can charge for our response. But even if they had a permit and there was a complaint at a house or whatever, and we came back, they could receive a citation, or that's not a citation, but it's a second response notice, which would then trigger associated.
And the house ordinance, ordinance that we want to pass, the social ordinance, that will be separate on top of this. It wouldn't be part of these fees. It'll be a new fee that we're going to add once we bring that.
Social host, and we talked about that term we coined, animal house ordinance.
Party house,
whatever. Those fees, if approved down the road, would be separate. And so it would usurp this in essence, I think, vamping our entire code.
So the amplified sound permit, Chief, you do have to get that if you have like a live band in your backyard, for example, at a house? You're required to get that?
I don't think for a house party, are you?
No, I thought you did, and I thought you had to go get your neighbors to sign it, no?
I believe we do make them do an amplified sound. They're amplifying any sound, doing electric guitar, things of that nature out in their backyard. Mayor's correct.
So Captain Ivansky, who's in the back of the room, said that yes, if somebody has a band or amplification, they need to do that. Thank you,
It
Chief.
seems a little steep. I was talking to some members of the audience about that on break. $255, I think, is what we're recommending going to for amplified sound. If I'm a business and I don't have the annual permit to provide entertainment on a regular basis, the $800 fee, I just want to do it one time. To me, that fee seems reasonable. It is the cost, but there's a reason they're doing it. It's going to improve their commerce. Whereas resident is having a band in the backyard, you still have to, I think, be done before 10 or 11 p.m., I think, right? Or something like that. But, I don't know, it just seems like a big fee to have a party in your backyard and have
I just think what's going to happen is people aren't going to pull them.
Then they'll just get they'll get the police department to come out.
Well, they're going to come out anyway, so what you're going to do is prevent people from, people are just not going to pull them at all.
My question would be, would the city issue an amplified sound permit to a residential, for a residence surrounded by a lot of other residences? Typically, I see these more like in a city park, where you're not people crammed on top of each other. So I guess my question to staff is, would you guys issue an amplified sound permit for that kind of thing, or would you just say that's not allowed?
I think a lot of residents don't even know one is required.
Yeah.
So what do you do if your kids are in a band and they're practicing in the garage? What are you going to do then? Are you going to get a permit?
Good point, yeah. I mean, I had neighbors where that happened, and it was more about just cooperation and, noticing, hey, we're going to have a party Friday night. And
Yeah. Make sure you invite everybody, that's all.
I don't think it's a common practice to request a permit for something that you're doing at a private residence. I think the intent behind it is more if you're going to be out at a park or something along those lines. But I admit that I don't know specifically the answer without looking in our municipal code and trying to look it up. So what I could do is do a little more research on that, figure out who specifically is responsible, what the intent is, and who's supposed to get it, and I can come back and report.
Chief, I actually have the code open in front of me, and the way that the code is structured just generally is that there's certain decibel limits, and that if someone knows they're going to exceed those limits, then it says the noise control officer may grant an amplified sound permit. So I think it would just be on a case-by-case basis. If someone came to the city and said they have this function, and we knew it was going to be a problem, then you could issue a permit if you wanted to.
Could you deny a permit and say that event's not allowed?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, practically speaking, would we apply to a residential property? Probably not. But the code doesn't limit it just to public areas, or at least from my quick reading of it, it doesn't seem like it's limited to just, you know, commercial uses. The code is very general.
Well, the thing is we have the permit, but if you don't pull the permit, there's no ramifications for not pulling the permit, so.
Well, I think we're mixing residential with
Yeah.
non-residential issues here. That's,
But do we have, okay, so say you're at Library Park and you're gonna have, you know, some music, and you don't pull the permit, what happens?
So
I mean, that would be the ramification to it, is if, so going back to the house, we would not proactively go to a house and say, you're having a loud party, shut it down. We would only go if somebody called us. So that they were complaining about, if, and I underline if, had cause to go to somebody gathering in the park or gathering somewhere, and they had their microphone, they had loud noise, and they're amplifying the noise, and they didn't have a permit, we could tell them you can't do that. That's even without somebody saying they wanted to be a victim of disturbing the peace. We could proactively say, well, if you don't have a permit, you can't use amplified noise here.
Mm-hmm.
That would be ramification.
And where we do see a lot of these amplified sound permits is special event permits. So events that happen through Rec and Park and the parks. So we do see quite a few of those coming through.
Well, and I agree, but I'm just wondering if we raise the price, I mean, not saying that we shouldn't raise the price, but are people just gonna not pull the permit?
Well, for special events, the special event wouldn't be approved unless.
Right, for the vast majority of them, they need it to be able to have their event in essence.
Got it.
It's on the checklist.
Okay.
If it was a pop-up, they didn't get a special event permit, somebody just randomly started amplifying noise, they probably aren't going to come in and pull a permit.
It's a public assembly, and then they get First Amendment stuff, and then that whole other thing. And
Gotta ask, sorry. A megaphone, is that amplified noise?
I'd have you.
I think it would have to be over a sustained period of time.
Okay, I was just curious, thanks.
but it comes down to a decibel level, right?
I've always wanted to carry one of those around, you know.
Maybe we should just give you a permanent permit.
Thank you, Chief. Hey, Eric?
Yeah. All right, fingerprinting. So if someone wants to come in and get fingerprinted for more private purposes for their job or coaching or whatever, the fee's going up from 30 to 35. Please report.
Does that still happen? Because I know that there's I forget the terminology. It's like when you do government work at Live County or something. The county does
Live scan. Yeah.
Live scan.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be similar?
It is live scan. So they
Okay.
don't print anymore. So that's what we're talking about
Gotcha.
here is the live scan. And the department does almost 500 of these a year.
Yeah, a lot of them are related to the schools.
Yeah. All right, police report copy.
so I do want to make
I'm sorry,
one
yeah.
smart-ass comment if I can here. On the citation sign-off service there, that's one of those things that really rubs me the wrong way. You know, if you get a fix-it ticket and then you go and make the repair or whatever it is, then somebody wants to come out and verify it, that's fine. So somebody comes from behind the desk, goes out and verifies it, and then there's a fee on top of that to verify that. And I got a problem with that because we're paying that person to be there, and if that doesn't occur, that cost doesn't go somewhere else. I mean, that's an added revenue on top of of another piece of a fine on top of it, on top of a fine here. So it's an absurd thing to me to have to do something and then have somebody else come out and verify it and then pay them that you verify that you've done it. I says, you can't take a picture with your cell phone. You can't do these other things and verify it. No, somebody's got to go out there and verify it. They got to sign your ticket, and it costs you $15 for their signature now. So I got a problem with that.
So does every city do that?
Both cities have this. Some cities will not charge a fee or charge a discounted fee if it's a ticket that was issued by that police department. And if it's an outside agency's ticket, then they'll charge the full cost.
Or for a resident? Because my fear would
Or
be if
for a
everybody else is doing it, then those people will come here.
Well,
Yeah, and so I certainly see a resident,
That's
non-resident fee.
the
component.
epitome of, let's just
Yeah.
charge everybody for everything we can charge them for along the line,
yeah,
is what
and-
it is,
yeah.
which I'm against, so I'm just,
Well, and part of my job is to bring you guys a full menu of your options.
Right,
And
well,
it's up
this
to
is
you to
cost-
decide, okay,
yeah.
that doesn't make sense for us.
This is cost recovery. I mean, would council be more comfortable if there were no fee for El Segundo residents? So that we don't become clearinghouse?
I look at it a little differently, Mike, because I think, I don't know enough about that position, but if their job is more than just doing citations, which I imagine
Well, I
it
think
is,
it
right?
is.
Yeah. Is it police officers or is
No,
it the
they just-
non?
This is a police service officer.
Police service officer.
Yeah.
They're doing other things, right? So if they had a bunch of citations, that could potentially increase their overtime because they got their other workload to get done. I do see a direct
you're gonna
relationship.
staff differently if you have it?
I don't know.
I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
I'm
not a
fine
big
with
chunk of
it.
time. There's about 300 of these a year. They're spending about 10 minutes per each one. So it's not.
10.
10, yeah.
Using a walker to get from the desk out to the curb?
I gotta get a cup of coffee.
I'm done, move on.
Yes.
All right. All right, police report copy. It's currently 20 cents a page, and we changed that to be the same as the city report copy. So the first 5 copies free and 20 cents for each additional page. So it would be, for the vast majority of these, would be no cost. And again, so the department's not having to deal with dimes and quarters and such at the counter. Photo reproduction is going up just a little bit from 30 to 35. Dispatch tape copy. We changed, the process has changed on this. It's a lot less labor intensive, and it's really more on a disc now, so it's really changing it to per request to per disc. So $100 per request to $10 per disc, so a big reduction there. And the same kind of thing for the police audio video tape copy. It's all really digital now, and so it's more a fee per disc. All right, animal control. So animal at large pickup, these fees are unchanged. The costs are quite a bit more. This is a 10% cost recovery. These are, in essence, market-based fees. If you charge too much, people will not pick up their animal, which is not what you want. And so we've got to set these fees at a level that people are willing to pay. Most people are willing to pay. So that's why we recommended no change on the animal at large pickup. The vicious animal hearing, there is really just something that we looked at before. There was no fee recommended before, so there's no fee currently. Even with the process that we identified of about almost $3,000 in staff cost for a vicious animal hearing, we didn't recommend a fee. It's more, this is something that we put forward as really a tax-supported service, but we wanted to show you guys that there is a fair amount of time spent on these. We're just not recommending a fee for it.
Is there a fine if there's an incident?
There are various fines. I'm not sure it's specifically related. I'm sure there are for vicious animals. Certainly vicious animals that are loose and
Depends how good your lawyer is.
Well, yeah, there's certainly civil action, but I was
Yeah.
thinking.
Like if there's a
Right.
repeat offense or something?
Right.
because I believe that the outcome of this is that the animal could be put down, and so there are other
Not
instances
from this, though.
bigger, larger issues.
Should we add a, not picking up your, your dog's mess fee in here?
Get the video camera out. Animal control license fees. We're recommending that the spade neuter fee, license fee stay the same at $20, but increase in the non-spayed or non-neutered. This is pretty common in most cities. We want to encourage people to spay or neuter their animals, so if they're not going to, they really should pay. Typical is $80 to $100. We've recommended $80. Some agencies charge even more. So that's the only change we recommended to the animal licensing fees. All right, so that is police. Moving on to Public Works. So this is really, water. So the water, this study does not look at the water rates. We're not doing anything related to the water rates, but there are certain services that certain customers receive over and above their water rate service. And so those are the fees we're looking at here. And so a water service lateral inspection, so on the inspection, on the installation of a new water service lateral. We want to recover those costs. And so we are showing quite a bit of increase on the cost here. So really, again, sat down with staff, identified who's involved, how many trips are you making out there. There's a lot of hand-holding that goes on here that doesn't go on in other agencies. And so that cost is being reflected here. So we're showing some large increases for that. And then there's a pre-planned review process that's in addition to the actual installation inspection. So there's a fair amount of time being spent before they even do anything to make sure where they're putting it, how they're doing it, what they're using. So that is a new fee that goes on top of that previous fee we're just looking at. So the whole water service lateral installation process, those costs have gone up quite a bit, and the fee therefore has gone up quite a bit. A water meter upgrade. This is a big effort by staff. They're actually doing the installation. It's not just inspecting somebody else's work. And so if you're going from a 3/4 inch meter to a 1 inch meter, it's about over $4,000 in staff time, plus the cost of the meter and supplies. So we had over just on the on the ground time, 10 hours of 4 people for that entire process from start to finish.
Can we contract that out? $40, 40 hours to do a water meter? I'm going to be free here pretty quick.
Yeah. So there's a big effort and there's about 10 of these a year. So there's a big effort that's currently going into doing these now.
So why are we doing this? Because I guess
the resident's requesting it.
The work itself.
The resident is requesting going from a 3/4 inch to a 1 inch meter, or a 1 inch meter to a 1.5 inch or 2 inch, or not necessarily res, could be business also.
I was going to say, so
the customer.
So this is kind of a philosophy that I have. One of the blessings of being in El Segundo is that you're surrounded by businesses. One of the curses is that you're surrounded by businesses here, right? So the blessing is that the fees to the businesses ought to be the ones that we look at on this. The residential, owner-occupied residents shouldn't be paying big fees for water meters because they're paying a big fee for water period going along it. So I don't have a problem with collecting this from the business side of the fence, but I do have a problem collecting it from the owner resident in the city here.
Well, and another way to look at it is that this is an additional service over the service that everybody else is receiving. That these 10 individuals, most of which are probably businesses, are receiving a higher level of service. They're getting a new meter put in that gives them a higher level of service at their house or business.
Right, and I think this falls under the chart you showed us, that it's a personal choice service. They're still going to get water if they don't do this. They'll still have a meter. Right. This is just an upgrade that is their decision.
And so that's why we broke it out as a separate one, because it's these individuals are receiving a higher level of service. At the end of the day, the council decides, no, this is something our water rates cover, and it should not be an additional fee.
What if everybody wanted to do it?
There's little to no reason to change a water meter unless you're improving your property, unless you're adding square footage and adding fixtures, right?
Or adding a fire service.
I just did one for fire sprinklers, for instance. Or if you were adding units to your property.
I was going to say, it's an improvement, it's part of the thing, but we charge a bunch for the water and we charge a bunch for the system that delivers the water, and that's part of a enterprise thing that.
But that's a pass-through, Mike. We charge, we collect those fees back. The city doesn't make any profit on that. We're just providing a product.
This is one where you could potentially look at splitting the cost between business versus resident if you wanted to.
My point was I don't have a problem charging a business it, but I do have a problem with the residents.
Right. What's happening right now is through the Prop 218 process, these fees were not included in the rates, so it's being subsidized right now by all the other users.
Right.
That's another way of looking at it.
So when the city came out and took a 1 inch away from me and put a 3/4 in, did they give me a refund? It actually happened. I didn't, you know, they needed the meter for something else and I didn't have, you know. So needless to say, well, I should send the bill, you know, I had to redo my sprinklers and everything else, my water pressure dropped. So it was a pain in the ass, but you know, realistically, when you.
Line or censor you, keep going.
But, no, it's just, the residents of this community ought to be treated differently. I don't have a problem with that. I think we're losing track of that.
Mike, I don't know. I mean, someone's going to improve their property.
So.
That's why they're doing it, is what I heard, right? It's not a mandate that the city is requiring, is it?
It's a change of a water meter. So.
But they have to do that. When are they asked to do that? They're asked to do that.
How many residents get this a year?
10, they said.
Well, 10 customers. We didn't break out residential versus commercial.
So.
10 people came and asked to say, I want a new water meter.
Yeah.
But if I have to add a higher volume water meter because I'm adding a big ADU on the back of my lot, let's just say, why should the city pay for that?
I don't think you would add the water meter is my point, because you're not going to have.
You wouldn't have to, or?
No, you're adding a couple of fixtures.
So we heard that if you're increasing your square footage or something, there's a benefit to you that it's part of the cost of having the benefit. And when it comes time to sell that property, there's a benefit that maybe you can recoup. And again, what if every house wants to do that? Then suddenly the city is paying $4,000 times X or N. So again, it goes under personal choice. Everybody has water delivered to their home.
Do you know how many residential permits there were for water meter improvements versus a commercial?
Through the mayor, no, not offhand. We could look that up. I don't know if we had that in detail. You know, to echo the thoughts, every property that is built, be it commercial or residential, comes with, here's your water meter, here's your service, so the baseline service. These cases are cases where through a choice or development, new or increased capacity that property owner wants for some reason, as the water purveyor, we go in and swap out their meter to have that increased service above the baseline services that are provided in our enterprise fund rates that we pay. So I guess that's all I could kind of try and define what's going on here, but it's a development triggered request, and maybe in your case a state conservation law need.
No, they needed the meter for somebody else, that's all.
Were you on council when that happened?
No.
Thank you, Ken.
Thanks.
So I did want to ask a question about the sewer backup. Where's it, the sewer spill response? If the issue is resulted from a city tree, so say the blockage from the sewer is a result of a blockage from the city tree, are we still charging the cleanup cost?
Now it's Ken's turn
So
to
I
wear a
thought-
path to the microphone.
I understood that the resident was responsible for everything.
Sorry, Ken.
Read on.
So as far as the sewer goes, the lateral that connects from the home to the main is the property owner's responsibility. So when it comes to the trees, city owned or private property owned, we do have different cases, and in general, if they have a city installed, they being a resident, let's say, as a city installed clean out, and our crews have cleaned out their laterals, regardless of what the problem tree ownership is. If it's not there, the lateral, if it's blocked, it's a private property owner's responsibility to basically hire a plumber and root out that lateral. And the tree and its health, city trees are maintained by recreation and parks.
And the sewer spill fee is meant for those private spills that go into the public right-of-way, and city staff or contract staff have to clean up that public right-of-way because of that private spill.
And I'm assuming that that billing typically happens after the fact. And if for some reason we felt it was the city's fault for the spill, we wouldn't bill the property owner.
Correct.
Thank you again, Ken.
Thank you, Ken.
All right, here.
Move on to water meter abandonment. This is someone typically because they want to move their water meter from, maybe they're putting in a driveway and they need to move it from one part of the property to another. They need to abandon that previous water meter. And so there's no fee for this currently. There's staff time involved to do that. So that's where we come up with the $210 fee.
Good luck collecting it, right? Yeah. It's not a relocation, huh? Your example was a relocation. Now it's an abandonment. The words are abandonment here. Okay. Keep going. I'm had enough here.
Temporary construction meter. So temporary water meters that are used for construction.
Yeah.
The city staff installs and removes, and on request will move the meter from one place to another because the meters are locked down. And so just instead of just a deposit fee, in essence, really no fee. The deposit's meant to encourage return of the meter. It's $110 for an installation, $80 for a move for a temporary construction water meter. Fire flow test witness. Again, no fee currently. Time spent to witness a fire flow test as part of a sprinkler, new sprinkler system. So $140 there. Damaged meter or sewer service line. This is usually in relation to people who've had their water service shut off for non-payment, and they try and turn the meter back on and damage the meter in doing so. So we're just saying charge the actual cost to repair whatever was broken.
So just real quick, back to that fire flow test witness. That's being, you're being proactive in ensuring that in case there's a fire, the sprinklers work, right? And that's what the whole reason.
And this is required as part of a new sprinkler system, that there's be a flow test and it'd be witnessed by some outside responsible party to say, yes, we're not fudging
Doesn't
the
the
numbers.
fire department do that?
Yeah. Oh.
I could be wrong, but because it's under Public Works, I believe it's a fire flow of a fire hydrant. We do those with new development coming in. So as new development comes in, we need to know what the fire flows are for the area to determine if particular construction could occur.
Thank you.
So that's part of the Public Works requirement, the Water Department.
Okay, great. Thanks, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
Thanks, Chief.
Thanks, Chief.
The annual backflow device program. There are, various backflow devices around the city, and there is city staff that monitors that program. The owners of the backflow devices are required to test them and to give those test results to the city to ensure that the devices are working properly and you're not infecting the water system, as it were. And so this would be an annual fee of $60 per device per year. That would be added on to the tune of about $60,000 to administer this program currently. So currently, yeah, this is something that's being funded by, in essence, water rates that we're saying doesn't affect all the water customers. So we're recommending a separate fee for it.
Yeah, but this is where I get grumpy, right? Because you start taking business requirements and passing them on to the overall, you've taken them and you've passed them on to the residents here. So now you want to pull it out and do it. I'm okay with that, yeah. But.
And most of the devices for this are going to be commercial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. New sewer lateral inspection. So the time spent to install a new sewer lateral, the inspection of the installation for that, for a new sewer lateral. No fee currently, saying $210. Sewer cap inspection, again, the inspection of the closing and capping of an abandoned sewer line. So the no fee currently, the cost related to that. Talk about the sewage spill response, that would just be an actual cost recovery. All right, new utility account processing. Currently, there's no fee to set up a new utility account. They have to put down a deposit. We are recommending increases to those deposit amounts to make it more reflective of today's dollars. But in addition, we're recommending that we recover the cost of processing that new water account through a fee of $85 to cover the cost of that new account. Okay, delinquent utility bill. Currently, you have a $10 delinquent bill fee. As we broke out the process, there's the billing part of the process, there's the red tag part of the process, all of which has cost. We'll get to the turn on, turn offs in a moment. This is just the bills and red tags before turn off. So we're saying raise that delinquent bill fee from $10 to $13, but institute a new red tag fee. So you get your delinquent bill, you still haven't paid, a red tag needs to not only be generated but delivered in person, put on the door. So we're saying you should create a new fee of $28 to recover those costs. The next page, delinquent turn off and eventual turn back on. Oh, sorry.
On ours, it's the same line item.
Sorry, I moved over to the book. The next service, delinquent utility bills. So we're saying the current fee is $10. So you just get, I'm sorry, I mixed up here. So current fee is $30. So you paid your $10 delinquent bill. If you get turned off, to get turned back on again, you got to pay $30 plus, of course, what you already owe. We're saying that that process, that turn off and turn back on process, is actually costing $100. So every time that someone gets turned off and turned back on, it's about an hour of total staff time, and we're saying that this fee should go up to $100. So currently people are paying $10 for a delinquent bill, $30 for a delinquent turnoff. We're recommending that go to $13 for a delinquent bill, adding in $28 for a red tag, plus $100 for a delinquent turnoff.
If I can just add to that, and there's a lot of staff time. I mean, this is very infrequent that it happens, but there's a lot of staff time involved here. So, you know, they do receive 2 late notices, then the red tag notice. And so they've received multiple notices, and Juliana actually will send staff out there before we shut it off, knock on the door, do welfare check, or with Sam's group to help out with that. So there's a lot of effort that's done on the city's behalf before it's actually shut off.
So is this adequate cost recovery?
With the new fee.
Is it, even with what you described?
I think maybe if council's they're willing to go with this recommendation, we can evaluate it for a year and see where we are next year.
I think it's part of a service we provide, right? So I don't think you itemize every little thing that's done or you go crazy here. But I appreciate that we're doing that. I'm trying to think of what causes the delinquency. If it's a money issue and you want more money out of people, that's going to be a problem, right? So. And if it's a lapse in payment, then it's a reminder and that'll work. But
just give you an idea of the scope, there's about 1,000 delinquent bills issued a year.
Yeah.
There's only about 78 delinquent turnoffs.
Yeah.
Okay. The next one, water meter test, $275. Note, someone feels that their water meter is running fast. The city's charging me too much. My water meter, there's something wrong with my water meter. I want you to come out and test it. That process, you got to pull the meter, you got to test the meter. Typically, you'll put another meter back. You got to put another meter back in, of course. But it's about a 2.5 hour process and we only get 5 requests a year. But we're recommending that fee recover the cost of $275. And if the meter is in fact running fast, you certainly refund that fee. but that's very rare. So this would be a new fee.
Does that process change with the new meters that the smart meters we're installing?
No, it doesn't. It's, the smart meters, the automated meters are a different way for us and more accurate way to read the meters, but folks still that feel they are being overcharged can request this test.
Thank you.
But the residents don't pay for the smart meter change out?
It's only part of our capital plan. That's a project itself.
Right.
Yeah,
So it will go as part of the water rate study.
for 5 meter, for 5 meters a year, I guess if you're questioning the accuracy of your meter, you're questioning it for a reason, right? So it's either
Yeah, but this is
your
just,
bill changed and you don't know why.
Oftentimes it's because there's a leak on the property, but they're convinced it's more the meter and it's not. Almost always it's the problem. There's a leak on the property somewhere that's causing the blip in the water rate, in the water bill.
So then it impacts water bills pretty detectable usually. So
My only concern, Mike, is that as our water rates go up, which they do and will, people often think that it's an issue with their meter and want it checked. And we're not inventing more water, so the cost increases.
if I may, counsel, the water crews,
it's 5 a year for crying out loud.
the water crews do a lot of hands-on investigation for folks that feel their bills are high. They'll go out there, they'll take a look, see if they can verify any issues, help the residents the best they can, and then if the resident isn't satisfied, this is the process that they can go through.
So it's kind of a last step.
Correct. Last step.
Okay, and then the last one, referred to our bad debt discussion earlier, referred to collection agency. And so this was more targeted towards water, but trying to recover the cost. If it goes to collection agency, the collection agency is going to keep their piece of that for their work and adding that onto what the city's now charging. So trying to recover the cost of what the collection agency cost the city back on that original debt. So this would certainly be a new fee.
So this says 5% of the amount owed to the city. So if it's $100 bill or $100 bill, then it's 105.
Right. Okay. So that is all of the non-recreation services. Did we want to dive into recreation? Do we want to, I mean, obviously this will be a much larger and much different discussion than all of this. We're really going to be talking about subsidy goals for recreation. We're not talking about full cost recovery for recreation. And, right, and actually there's very little change as far as what we're recommending. It's, like I said, these are market-based fees, and so staff has done a good job of already being in the market. So there wasn't desire on anyone's, on staff's part or my part, to change that because we all felt that it was.
Yeah, no, I'd like to go ahead. This council okay with that? Yes?
Okay.
How long is it going to?
How long do you anticipate? It's 3:29. Oh,
I would like to think we could wrap this up by 4.
is that too long, Dr. Brand?
It's all going to come back on 17th of April, right?
It depends how far we get on the recreation. The other stuff certainly will, depending on how comfortable you feel with what we present here in recreation. Since there's very little change anyways, it very well could.
I think what you're going to hear is that we're subsidizing recreation functions in this city. Staff will explain the reasons why we want to continue that practice. And the net result is, I don't believe we're recommending a lot of significant change in the recreation fees.
Greg, there may be, and council, there may be a discussion on non-residential fees.
Okay. So you have a printout for recreation, and on the second page of that printout is where I'd like you to focus, a nice colorful spreadsheet. That's something like that. So it looks like this on the front. It has recreation and parks in the title.
Yes.
And then if you flip to the second page, it looks like this.
Bigger font, too.
Yes. I appreciate that also.
I
So
have one.
we're all.
So page 3.
These are them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's underneath your other packet, probably. No?
It's a separate one.
I don't have it.
This one? It's this.
He doesn't have that one.
You can't, unless you want it for your own files, right?
All right. When we look at recreation, we look at recreation differently because it's a market-based fee. It's nice to know what the costs are, but the fees are going to be based on what people are willing to pay for these services. If they don't want to, if it gets out of their range of what they're comfortable paying, they just won't use the service. And so there's that mixture of wanting to maximize participation while also maximizing revenue. And so it's trying to hit that happy point that is what we're aiming for with recreation. So we cost everything out the same way we do with all the other services. We know what the full cost of providing these services are. And so if you look at that spreadsheet, you'll also see we broke out its component pieces. Because at the end of the day, we'd like you to focus on what we're calling the direct cost. Not that the other costs don't exist and aren't important, but at the end of the day, we'd like the City Council to weigh in on a cost recovery policy for recreation services. And then give the recreation staff the flexibility within that policy to respond to the market, to be able to pick up additional classes that are all of a sudden popular, to be able to pick up additional programs that are popular, to be able to play around with the fee schedule in a way that responds to what people are willing to pay, and to give them that flexibility. And then come back to you and say, here's how we've done with your direction. We've recovered X% of our direct cost. And the reason I want to focus on direct cost is because recreation knows what their direct costs are. You see, we've also added in facility and field costs. We identified what does it cost to maintain all the fields, who's using those fields, and allocated the cost to those programs. We identified the cost of maintaining the buildings, who's using those buildings, and allocated the cost to those buildings. And that's all great information. But to ask recreation staff to then go back on an annual basis and recreate that is asking a lot. The same thing on the indirect costs, the city overhead costs, those costs from the cost allocation plan. Again, it's the real cost. It's a question of, are we asking recreation staff to go back and update the cost allocation plan every year just so they're able to tell you that we've recovered X% of our total cost? I'd much rather have a policy of we want to recover X% of our direct cost, even if it's a higher percent, even if it's the only goal is to have a meaningful number, whether it's a percent of this or a higher percent of a smaller base. And so if we focus on direct cost and look at direct cost recovery, that becomes a meaningful number that recreation staff does know what their direct costs are. They can tell you in a second, we're spending this much on these various different programs, and can easily come back to you on an annual basis and say, hey, we've recovered, based on the changes we made, we've recovered 42% of our direct costs, whereas last year we recovered 39%. So if we have goals based on that, it's easier for you to respond as the council to what recreation is doing on an annual basis. So that's the broad brushstroke of what we did and how this spreadsheet, why we're using this spreadsheet for this and not the other services that we looked at. And so you see we've broke out and grouped together certain things, certain like things. So recreation programs, all those kind of the meat and potatoes, adult sports, youth sports, day camp, teen center, rec classes, aquatics, youth drama, senior services, we all group together. And they all have various different direct cost recovery rates. But instead of setting a recovery goal for each one, we're recommending a broad recovery goal of, they're currently recovering 39.6% of the direct cost of those programs. So you see in the yellow column, under the first subtotal, you'll see that 39.6. So when we look at all those programs in the aggregate, they're recovering 39.6% of their direct cost. Only 18% of the total cost, because it's very facility and field intensive. And so that's why we're recommending, with no change, with the fees, the basic cost recovery where you're at today, of a policy goal of 40% recovery for direct costs. And so when you look in the detail on the first sheet, you'll see that most of these services have that stated, that the goal for recreation programs as a whole should be 40% direct cost recovery.
Is that kind of standard, 40% of direct cost?
It really varies. It's generally in the 40 to 60 ballpark. It's
because you're saying what we're at currently, we're at 39.6, and you're recommending going to 40.
It's basically status quo. It's basically just rounding up. That's a very 39.6. That's a very minimal change. It's really just coming up with a round number. The percent recovery for communities with pools is always lower. Pool, and this is not including the new aquatic facility. This is including just the existing aquatic facility. They're very expensive to run. And so as you see, when we look at the aquatic service line, REC 006, it's only recovering 8% of its direct cost and 3.5% of its total cost.
Can I call your attention to line 16, Drew? You look at that one for me? Can you read that out loud to the people so they know?
Yeah, and I'll also read the caveat that it excludes the roughly $5 million. It's in here as a footnote.
Which is in question.
I got a question though. So you're suggesting the 40% cost recovery, Eric, at the I guess subtotal of programs, not like going to 40% for youth sports, for example.
Correct. It's just within that group of programs recovering 40%. So there may be some you recover 80, some you recover 20. Like I said, it's really giving the recreation staff the flexibility to respond to their market and to be able to adjust the fees on the fly that at the end of the day fit within your broad policy goal.
I do have a question. So I was just looking at like adult sports, this basketball, not resident, non-resident. Is the percentage difference between the resident, non-resident similar to what we do at the golf course and then as well as what we've just done at the pool? We should have the same philosophy as far as our resident versus non-resident fees.
Yeah, we definitely like to talk about that. I know we've talked about having a consistent percent increase for non-resident fees going forward.
There should be some consistency.
And I think we talked about 25%. So currently we do 20%, and so we're talking recommending that go up to 25% for as a broad policy.
Is that what we just did for the golf? Is it 20? What percentage did we go up for the golf? I just think we should just be consistent wherever we have fees. That makes sense, obviously.
Yeah, as far as the golf course fees, they've not really fallen under our normal general fund policy for our non-resident surcharge. So they're looked at a little bit differently. For all of these programs that you look at here, our policy for non-resident surcharge is a 20% or $15 flat fee, whichever is greater. So the programs that fall under $75 have a $15 flat fee on top of that, which we wanted some more consistency, and that's what we wanted to recommend today, is just making it a percentage across the board, because we do have some senior programs, even some of our swim lessons that are on the lower end, $20, $30, and non-residents then are paying more like 50% of a surcharge. We also just recently learned that our new software system will allow us to basically program in that percentage, and it will automatically apply the fee across the board. So from a staff administrative standpoint, right now we're manually calculating all of these double fees, non-residents, and entering them.
Mm-hmm. As far as though, if you do a flat, like a percentage, like a 20% or 25%, does the system allow you to round it up to the closest dollar or closest, so that it's a little more, executable 'Cause, I mean, otherwise you're gonna have some crazy numbers, like,
Yeah, I don't know if the system does. Right now, we have crazy numbers though, of $36.40 or,
right,
but I hope so.
yeah, because that would just make it seem easier if you could raise it, like, if it could round up to the closest 50 cents or something.
Meredith and I had actually had that same discussion
Okay.
earlier. And I think it's good to point out too that even with whether it's 20% or 25%, we're still subsidizing the non-resident.
Yeah, at the end of the day, if you charge full cost for non-resident, it would be at such a high level, you're basically saying we don't want non-residents. That non-residents would stop coming entirely because it would be cost prohibitive.
I think, I was just going to say, I think it kind of depends on what it is. I mean, there are some scarcer resources, right? Like I'm thinking of, aren't there occasions when the rec park fire pit or things like that are hard to get? Where I think we would want to make it cost prohibitive for the non-residents.
And our facility reservation fees apply that philosophy.
Okay.
But some non-residents, are businesses included? Because I know we have businesses in town who maybe annually use our facilities for an event. So I don't know that we want to price them out. I know they're businesses, but.
Kind of switching gears from program costs to facility rental costs. But on the facility rental side, we have 3 categories. It's El Segundo resident or nonprofit, El Segundo for-profit business, and then a non-resident category. Those are charged at basically the base rate for the resident for category 1, and then times 2 and times 3. So it is pretty substantial of an increase for non-resident facilities.
And then going back to program costs, what we were talking about, when I've looked through other cities, and to Joe's point, they aren't cost prohibitive for non-residents. If somebody here wanted to do something in another city, they have that percentage you're talking about, but it's not 3 times as much, or the actual cost recovery.
And I would also say that we do rely to a certain degree on non-resident enrollment. Oftentimes we might have classes that would be in jeopardy of being canceled if we didn't have a couple extra students from neighboring cities or people who work in town who might have kids in daycare.
I know with the youth drama program, which is fantastic, a lot of those kids don't live in town, but their parents might work here, or they have family in town that they stay with in the summer, and they add a lot, those productions.
Can I get some clarification, Meredith, on, I'm looking at adult sports. I look at, the 20% increase, basketball, for example, non-resident versus resident. Then I skip down to, I guess softball's the same, 20%, kickball. So is that $240 if I'm a non-resident for soccer? Is that for a league? Or what is that for?
Right. Yeah, all the adult sports are leagues.
Okay.
So this is per team.
Per team?
Yes.
So $24 theoretically per week, because it's 10 weeks roughly, right? Normally, something like that?
Right.
That seems really inexpensive for non-residents, and I know we have a real issue with residents getting field time as a priority over non-residents. That would be an example where I think we might, you're the expert here, Meredith. I'd love to hear your thoughts, but.
I think I would agree, and I think going through this exercise and seeing how everything's shaping up on the very right-hand column, having that overall goal of 40% and allowing us to work within that gives us that opportunity, because I look at some of these and definitely see them as being too low. Typically, you would see senior programs and youth programs on the lower end, but the adult sports, to me, there's no reason why we wouldn't want to recover more.
So that's $240 per person on the team, or just for the
Per
team?
team.
For 6 for that's really
And
cheap.
that's not just games, that you might be on the field once or twice a week, right? Like maybe 3.
It's
I think there's one
like
practice
a softball
day.
league. You play 1 game a week.
And then
pays the $240 or whatever.
Like soccer, though, we play a game, but we're on the field practicing once or twice
Practice
a week
day,
as well.
right.
So you're out there
you're
like
3
3 to 4
times.
hours. Yeah, with the kids, right?
Additionally,
Adults too. No, adults too. I played on the adult league. We played Friday nights, and we practiced during the week as well. At least one night.
yeah, there's a practice day.
Yeah.
So that is really cheap. So
I think it's
I mean,
really
how many
very
people are on a
inexpensive.
Mm-hmm.
team?
In soccer, well, 11 aside, I think, play, so
So you have
probably
15 on a
15.
squad. Yeah,
Wow,
usually.
so it's nothing.
Yeah.
Additionally, the teams pay
$10 to
the umpires and referees separately, so that's not included in the cost of the program. They pay them directly, just as a note. But yeah, I agree. I think they're.
So are you going to then come back and if we say we agree to the 40%, you're going to come back and give us some changes in the fees to make that 40%?
I think what we're asking is the flexibility to allow us to do that within when we're programming the different.
And are you asking to be, so there's two things. Are you asking us to approve the 40% as well as asking to come up with the 25% for the non-resident versus resident? Those are the two components. And then when you take that if we prove that and then you take that information, you'll come back and present us what the actual what the actual fees come out to?
If you'd like us to do that, we can definitely keep you informed, but we would make those adjustments internally based on the information we now have.
Can you also base fees on time of day, sort of like the Metro presentation we had this week? If you're using your express lanes and it's more expensive during rush hour than it is at 4 a.m. I mean, can we have, I forget the name for the term.
Dynamic pricing.
Thank you, dynamic pricing. I mean, can we have some sort of dynamic pricing for this?
Like weekend rate versus a non-weekend
Or
rate?
night times
I
versus.
think they do that for hockey time, don't they? Ice time?
I don't know, I don't play
That's
hockey.
why kids play at like 5 a.m. or something crazy.
I thought that's because it was available ice time.
I don't know.
But you're right, like renting the fire pit on a Friday night versus renting on a Tuesday night should have a different price point.
And now that you have software, it'll make it so easy, Meredith.
I'd
That
have to
probably
look
makes it
into
more
that.
cumbersome than it's worth, to be honest with you. I like the simple things about 40% recovery and 25% non-resident, and you work with the rest of it. I don't want to get
25% non-resident.
Yeah, 25%.
Well, the Rexton Park Commission, do they weigh in on the fees?
Sometimes, if we have a new program, we would bring it to them.
Yeah.
I think this is.
I think we should.
Jesus Christ, people.
That's 3.
But again, like Eric said, it is based on the market. I mean, we
don't
could
know
take a
how.
look at the other cities and see what's. We know we're low on adult sports. We know that.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
I think there's 2 other fees we wanted to talk about.
Are we going to set aside, I can't remember, I know that with campus, we didn't have, I don't think we had an equipment replacement fund, did we? Or we had some money set aside? Are
We do.
changing how much we're allocating based on these fees for turf replacement and things like that in the future?
That's included in these
Okay.
numbers.
It could be a separate line item for every.
Another slush fund. Let's put one.
So
in.
then, so also the question on the day camps, are you giving a discount for nonprofit versus for-profit camps? You're going to come up with a different costing structure for those two?
Well, those are camps
This is
we
for
run.
camped programs that
ours,
we
okay.
offer, yeah.
Yeah, this
not
is
in-
our program. This is our program.
So it doesn't include anybody who wants, like a for-profit company that wants to use our facilities?
That's rental. That's
That would be
different.
a rental fee. Yes, nonprofit has a lower fee. And then there are 2 others that we wanted to talk about, the permit fees.
So if we go back to the non-colored sheet,
But just before we move on, so are we agreeing to the 40% and the 25%?
Yeah, that's what I heard.
I'm saying yes to that, so.
Okay.
for block party
Dr. Brand?
permits, you're currently charging $25 for a block party permit for the time spent staff to review that and make sure it's being done safely. Full cost is $382 because we have police and senior admin specialists. We looked at it as just the direct cost recovery, which ends up being $55. So we didn't feel that a $380 block party permit fee is something that is realistic, but we did feel that $55, which covers the direct cost as defined with the other recreation programs, is something that is still realistic.
I think the direct cost, what you're talking about, is just the processing of the permit itself versus.
What are you looking at?
Block party
So
permit.
it's REC 010.
Okay.
Versus total cost, which includes, Public Works taking out barricades and.
Police to review it also. And
But that's,
Well, do we really, the only time we really do a lot of block parties is 4th of July.
Correct.
And graduation nights and stuff that happen too. So.
Yeah, we probably about 10 a year. 9 of them at 4th of July.
yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, no, I know you did. So
See now, would you have paid the additional fee there, Fran?
Yeah, no, I always paid, and 4th of July, and you have to have an insurance liability.
Yeah, I think
for
55
$1
is
million or.
Correct.
The last item is our private special event permits, and so these are for private special events on public property. And so the total cost of this, just for the permit, was $508. The day of the event time that staff is spending throughout the course of the year is about $51,000. We're saying that the processing fee should go from $60 to $135. So like the block party permit, just recovering the direct cost and not the indirect and other departmental costs. So instead of a $510 full cost permit fee, we're recommending $135.
Is that like a wedding
These
or
are,
something?
Like a
Rick Park?
5K.
This is Run for Education, Richmond Street Fair, Soapbox Derby, things like that. And just another note while you're considering this one is currently the $60 processing fee is not waivable. So a lot of these events have already approved fee waivers, either 25%, 50%, 75%, or 100%. The $60 is a flat rate, no matter if they have that fee waiver in place or not. And so one way to go about this would be to charge for full cost recovery of that permit processing for $135, but then allow that to be applied to their fee waiver. So if an event has a 50% fee waiver, then they would pay half that.
Because we have a matrix for all the service organizations and the different events in town. They basically get one a year, so that we partner with them.
That way the philosophy is that that it's priced at that way, but then their fee waiver applies across the board to all those.
Okay, I'm okay with that.
And then the remaining services, we're not really recommending any change. There's various fees, entrance fees, vendor fees for farmers markets, city special events. We're not recommending any changes to the various recreation facility and field rental fees.
So just real quick, so on the ball field rental, is this by hour or is it just for the day, similar to the library?
The ball field rental, I think that you're looking at for youth sports groups,
Yeah.
or the $10 resident, $30 non-resident.
Yeah.
That's a per player fee that's charged to the youth sports organization. So
Okay.
this is the one that's based on their regular league roster.
So
Then
it's an
AYSO.
So it's an annual fee, like, so.
The annual fee.
For like AYSO, they'll pay for all the kids.
Or a season.
A season, right.
It's for the year.
Oh, for the entire year?
Right.
That's pretty generous.
Based
Yeah,
on
it
their regular season.
For non-residents.
And do we ever like rent out the ballpark for an afternoon?
Yeah, on occasion.
And do we charge by the hour for that?
Yes.
I know tournaments have been held there by other organizations, like at the softball fields. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions for? I would really appreciate everybody's work on this. I think this is a good step forward, cost recovery. And thank you for identifying that $1.4 million of annual subsidy.
So, Mayor, unless there's objection, staff will do the necessary documentation and noticing for an April 17th discussion of the adoption of the actual fees. I did take note on a number of suggestions and direction that you gave us for future years as far as the frequency of the review, the frequency of the full analysis, the library rooms, and the evaluation of those.
Thank you. Thank you, Eric, and staff, everybody who participated in this. Joe, thank you. Meredith. Okay, with that, at 3:55, we are adjourned.